right, good morning, everyone. The time is now 9 o'clock, and we bring the December 12th board meeting of Contractor State License Board to order. My name is Michael Mark, and I am our board chair. First, if we could please all stand for Pledge of Allegiance, I would like to invite Vice Chair Miguel Galarza to lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. And now I will note that for the record that we have some excused absences: Jacob Lopez, Thomas Ruiz, Amanda Gallo, and Mary Tykert. And Henry Nutt will be running about a little bit later today. Robin, can you please call roll?
Miguel Galarza.
Here.
Alan Guy.
Here.
Joel Barton.
Here.
Rodney Kobos.
Here.
Amanda Guy has an excused absence. Jacob Lopez has an excused absence. Diana Love.
Here.
Henry Nutt will be behind. Steve Pinelli.
Here.
Joseph Preciado.
Here.
Jim Ruane.
Here.
Thomas Ruiz has an excused absence, and Mary Tykert has an excused absence. We have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Robin. Also joining us today is CSLB staff of Registrar David Folk, Chief of Licensing Carol Gagnon, Chief of Legislation Rebecca May, Chief of Enforcement Steve Grove, Chief of Public Affairs Catherine White, and Chief of Administration Ingrid Wachowski, Chief of IT Jason Perez, and Executive Office Analysis Robin Williams. Board Legal Counsel John Ken is also present, along with DCA Assistant Deputy Director for the Board and Bureau Relations, Yvonne Durentes. Before we move to public comment, I'd like to make a couple of brief acknowledgments. Governor Newsom appointed a new public member to the board in November. I want to welcome Joseph Preciado to the board. Joseph currently works as an economic and small business development representative for the Sacramento SMUD, Sacramento Municipal Utilities District. He's also a higher education consultant for SOVA Solutions, following a history of working in higher education at American River College in Sacramento State. Joseph, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Chair Mark. It's a pleasure and an honor to serve on the board. Thank you for the warm welcome. My background, as you mentioned, in education, workforce development, and strategic planning gives me a strong understanding of the pressing and relevant issues that the board is tasked with regulating and enforcing statewide. I'm excited to leverage my experience to further the mission, vision, and values of the CSLB, and I'm committed to both learning and actively participating in discussions to further the board's strategic objectives. I look forward to collaborating with you all and learning more about current initiatives. Thank you.
Welcome on behalf of the board. Welcome to the board, and we look forward to serving with you. And last Friday, Governor Newsom issued a press release confirming that he has appointed Yvonne Durentes as Assistant Deputy Director of Legislative and Government Affairs at the Governor's Office of Emergency Services. Congratulations. You'll be missed by CSLB and the board staff, and look forward to your continued advancement in your career. So next, we're going to move to agenda item B, public comment for items not on the agenda and future agenda item requests. So now is the time. The board values public input as part of our consumer protection mission. To allow us enough time to conduct our full schedule of business today, I am limiting public comments to 3 minutes apiece. If your comments don't involve an item on today's agenda, this will be the time where you can make them. If you have comments on one of our agenda items, we encourage you wait until we get to that item. We'll give you an opportunity to make your comments at that time. We also ask that public comment relate to the agenda item currently before the board. There are a few other rules that apply. First, California law prohibits board members from discussing any matter brought up during public comment. And board members are not allowed to act on any item not on today's agenda. Second, if you want the board to discuss a topic not on the agenda, you can ask us to consider placing that issue on the agenda for a future meeting. Finally, if you have an application, complaint, or disciplinary charges pending before the board, we ask that you not discuss the details of your case or pending complaint. That's because board members may be the judges and by law are not permitted to receive evidence or information that is not part of the administrative record for the case. So now is the time for public comment for items not on the agenda. If you could please line up on this left, my left, your right. And first, please state your name and the organization that you're representing. Thank you. IT and our staff will look into it and try to bump up our volume. Next up.
To welcome everybody here. Thank you very much for all coming here. Michael and I are great colleagues. We work in the same building together. I know him well. Just as our welcome, I just wanted to share a few stats about the local and where you're at today. So currently, Local 104 jurisdiction covers 49 counties of California. We go all the way down to Ventura, Oregon border, all the way to the Nevada border, and kind of a weird shape there, but we cover 49 counties. Approximately 10,000 members throughout that jurisdiction, okay? Including retirees and everything, but active participating members. Scope of work that Local 104 covers is architectural metal roofing, wall panels. HVAC is probably our big core, air quality in our buildings, right? It's a big part of this local and what we train in, which is a huge thing for that industry, right? We cover a lot of industrial. We still cover residential. A lot of people don't understand that we still do residential work here in Local 104, and service, of course, balancing the air and keeping that air quality nice and for us in our offices. Currently, right now, in Local 104, we have a little over 800 apprentices, okay, here currently in this district, we have about 559 apprentices. I just checked this morning. So we usually, right now it's a slow time, we usually carry a little higher number, but we have currently right here in District 1 in the Bay Area counties, 559. Today, I'm hoping that all of you can hang out and do a tour of this building because this is a building, it's a school that teaches. And the tutorial you'll get and the gentleman that'll give you the tour, he built this building, he knows this building. You guys will get good education about how we train our apprentices. So I really would like for you guys to encourage you guys to go to the tour. We still have a great partnership with our contractors. So this is not just labor that's running the show here. We have a great partnership with our contractor association. We work in conjunction with them in every aspect of training and dispatching our apprentices to them and everything. So with that said, please have a great meeting. Appreciate all of you being here and coming to see our facility, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian Masters, for the comments. That was well deserved. And again, what Brian Masters stated was we're going to have a tour of this facility directly after this board meeting. Is there any other public comment? Seeing no other public comment, we will move on. Board members, is there any items on the agenda that you would like placed for a future agenda? Seeing none, are there any comments from the public for a future agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move on. And maybe Rick, what you can do is if you're getting more text back and forth, let our IT know if the volume's better, okay? Moving on to item C, presentations of certificates of recognition. I will now take this opportunity to recognize one of CSLB's most outstanding staff persons, Special Investigator Delphine Tran. Delphine began her CSLB career in 2012 as a Consumer Service Representative, or CSR, where Delphine made an immediate impact by quickly exceeding the CSR closing averages of 10 cases per month. Delphine promoted through the ranks of Special Investigator, where she was occasionally assigned application investigations. For background, in 2022, in response to staffing challenges, CSLB reassigned Licensing Division Experience Verification Unit staff to assist with various licensing processes and begin referencing suspect applicants and random pool applications to the Enforcement Division. These applications require additional investigation above and beyond the review performed by Licensing Division staff. Many of the applicants have been flagged by enforcement staff, or there is concern regarding the accuracy of statements made in the application. I do want to confirm that all the applications received are closely reviewed by licensing staff to confirm the applicant meets minimum experience requirements by the more than 30 licensing technicians. In early 2024, with board approval, CSLB management completely transferred applications that were related to flagged applicants, suspect applications, and random pool experience applications to Enforcement Quality Assurance Unit. The Experience Verification Unit became the Licensing Support Unit. As part of CSLB's Quality Assurance Unit, Delphine quickly took the lead in performing investigations of random pool applications, flagged applicants, and applications referred to by licensing staff for further investigation. Last fiscal year, 2023 through 2024, Delphine has completed a very impressive 407 applications, which is certainly evidence of her commitment. Some of those stats include applications withdrawn, 55, applications verified, 245, applications that did not need further action was 9, and recommended denial, 98, for a total of 407. Delphine, thank you for your hard work and dedication. I will now read the plaque and invite Delphine to join me for a photo. So just a word of privilege here. So I've heard of all of the great work that Delphine has done for CSLB. I've been in countless meetings, and her name consistently comes up, and I am so proud of you and honored to be able to present you with this award today, so thank you. Please give a round of applause for Delphine. So we're gonna sit on this side, but I'm gonna read the plaque here, because there's no microphone over there. So the Contractor State License Board presents the recognition for distinguished service to Delphine Tran, Special Investigator, for 12 years of service to CSLB, including her dedicated work as an application investigator. On behalf of the board, we thank you for your outstanding efforts to thoroughly investigate applications and verify experience of future licensees. One more round of applause.
Well, I just want to say thank you to the board members and also to CSLB, Dave, Steve, who had, tried to make that change and give me the opportunity. Thank you, Joe, for your support. The management and the staff in licensing really helped make my job, running smooth. And so thank you again, CSLB and the board.
Thank you again. Okay, so moving on, we're going to move to agenda item D, the executive update. The first item is review and possible approval of the September 18th through 19th, 2024 Legislative Committee meeting summary and board meeting minutes. The review and possible approval of September 18th Legislative Committee summary and minutes begin on page 9 of the packet. Do any board members have any edits to the minutes? Seeing that there's no edits, can I please get a motion to approve said minutes?
Motion.
Second.
We got a motion and a second to approve the Legislative Committee meeting summary and board meeting minutes from September 18th and 19th. Is there any comment from the board members? Is there any public comment on this item? Roll call, please.
Michael Mark,
Yes.
Miguel Galarza,
Yes.
Alan Guy,
Yes.
Joel Barton,
Aye.
Rodney Cobos,
Aye.
Amanda Gallo has an excused absence, Jacob Lopez has an excused absence, Diana Love, Steve Pinelli,
Aye.
Joseph Preciado, Jim Ruane,
Aye.
Thomas Louise and Mary Tyker both have excused absences. Motion passes.
All right, thank you, Robin. Next, we're going to move to the Registrar Report, item D2.
Thank you, Chair Mark, and good morning, everyone. I'd like to start by sharing a real highlight that we had on November 19th. Chair Mark had an idea that we could have a meeting that would be comprised of state agency leaders and the building trades and building trade investigators. And we did conduct that meeting on the 19th in Sacramento. And I wanted to mention who was on the panel. It was a panel, I will say, conference or interactive discussion. We had leaders from the Department of Insurance, Employment Development Department, Department of Industrial Relations, specifically DOSH is the ones that oversee the safety on construction sites, and also DLSC oversees wages. And we were very fortunate to have the federal government in attendance with the wage and hours. So everyone learned a lot about different responsibilities, how to make referrals, what the priorities are. And the real focus of that meeting was just on how we can protect the public as it relates to license, tax, safety, and wage compliance, so that we have safe construction sites, the contractors are licensed, and the employees are paid the wages they're owed. We had approximately 85 in attendance, so it was a great turnout. Steve Grove represented CSLB on the panel. Don Willis, who just stepped out, was also on the panel. Don is our Public Works investigator. So just a huge thanks to Chair Mark and to Steve for the work they did on it, and Public Affairs for putting it on, getting it all together, so tremendous success. And I just have an update on the next board meetings. We're planning to have a board meeting on March the 14th in Commerce. I thank Joel Barton for finding a facility for us. We're really looking forward to the IBW facility for that meeting. And the board meeting after that is scheduled for June 13th. We're going to be looking at Monterey or the Salinas area. That won't be in conjunction with the Nevada Contractors Board as it has been for the last 14 years. They've asked that we have a meeting with them in September, and that meeting's not been scheduled, and that'll be dependent on the next board chair. So that would conclude the registrar update, unless there's any questions. Thank you.
Any questions from board members? Seeing none, I'll make a couple comments. First off, Register folk, appreciate all of your hard work in making sure that compliance meeting went well. From my conversations with a lot of the staff and all the building trades compliance individuals, they really felt that the leadership CSLB took to do that was wonderful, and they were looking forward for, in the big scheme of things, how we can protect the consumers of California. So a round of applause for everybody. Thank you. Okay, so we're now moving to item 3, budget update. We are on page 53 of your packet. I will invite Chief of Legislation Representative Rebecca May to provide this update.
Thank you, Chair Mark, and good morning, board members. The budget update begins with the budget summary on page 55. For fiscal year 2024-25, CSLB has an authorized budget authority of $82 million. The final year-end projections are $94 million in revenue, $82 million in board expenditures, and $6.3 million in mandatory external costs. If you turn to the next page, you'll see a chart that details our fiscal 24-25 expenditures through October. As noted, we have spent roughly 36% of our budget authority so far. The chart below that shows our revenue performance through October. Overall, I'm happy to report we have collected almost $40 million, which is a 6.6% increase compared to the previous year. On page 57, you'll find our fund condition, which projects out to budget year 25-26. The middle column reflects our current fiscal year and shows our beginning fund balance at $41.7 million. If our year-end projections from page 55 are realized, then we should increase our reserves by year-end to $47 million, which equates to 6 months of reserve. Turning to page 58, the chart shown is the Construction Management Education Account Fund condition, which we continue to see an increase in annual donations. I'm happy to report we received final approval by the Department of Finance to increase our grant disbursements this fiscal year from $175,000 to $225,000. This will be discussed in greater detail during the licensing update. Finally, let me briefly mention the statistical summary provided on pages 59 and 60. For the first quarter of this fiscal year, we show promising numbers with an increase in most areas. In particular, I'd like to highlight that renewals also appear steady for the first quarter with a 2.5% increase from 2 years ago. So that concludes the budget update, unless there's any questions.
Seeing no questions, I want to thank Stacy Paul, again, our CSLB budget manager, for all of her hard work. I know some of the key points that I always look at is the amount of reserves that our organization currently has, and right now we're at 6 months on that page at 55. So when I first joined the board, when we were at 1 point, I think 9 reserves to now at 6 months, it's like we're rolling. So it's really, really good. With that, there's no other comments. I'm going to move on to D4, administrative update. We are now on page 61 of your packet, and I invite Administrative Chief Ingrid Wachowski to provide this update.
Thank you, Chair Mark, and good morning, everyone. Beginning on page 63, you will find the administration update. I will begin by providing the personnel update. CSLB averaged 24 vacancies out of 425 authorized positions during the first quarter of fiscal year 24-25. Between July 1st, 2024 and September 2024, which is a 6% vacancy rate. Moving to page 64, CSLB personnel will host the second part of a 2-session career consulting class for employees. The first session was held in August 2024 and focused on how to locate CSLB vacancies, tips on completing the state application, and tips on drafting and submitting statement of qualifications. Part 2 is scheduled for December 12th and will focus on preparing for an interview and interview tips. Regarding employee recruitment, CSLB personnel staff participated in 2 career fairs during the second quarter of fiscal year 2024-2025. The first was held in Santa Ana and sponsored by Representative Lou Correa, Assembly Member Avelino Valencia, and Senator Tom Umber. Attendees included job seekers, college students, and graduates from California's 46th Congressional District, and included the cities of Anaheim, Santa Ana, Stanton, Fullerton, and Orange. The second fair was in partnership with the Employee Development Department, and CSLB participated in a job fair for California's veterans on November 7 at the B.T. Collins U.S. Army Reserve Center in Sacramento. CSLB will continue to work with DCA, the California Department of Human Resources, and other organizations to partner and participate in future career fairs statewide. On page 65, we included updates regarding facilities, contracts, and training. Not to discuss the very important enforcement unlicensed practice and staffing recruitment study, and I know this study is very important to Chair Mark, and many of you attending the meeting today. The initial request for a proposal to evaluate the resources to address unlicensed practice in California and unlawful construction activity in declared disaster areas did not result in any responsive bids by the final filing date of November 27, 2023. On December 13, 2023, the board approved a motion to increase the amount of available funds for this project from $75,000 to $200,000. During the process of reposting the RFP, the Department of Finance Budget Letter 2327 was released, requiring state agencies to justify why any proposed expense is mission critical. Staff submitted their request to the department in May 2024 and subsequently developed a scope of work and deliverables for the department's review on July 9, 2024. Recognizing the difficulty in obtaining a private consultant and need to start the study underway, executive staff consulted with Chair Mark, and it was decided to consider a university to perform the study. A university can be hired through the interagency agreement rather than the lengthier request for proposal, bidding, and contract process. After contacting various universities, it was decided to pursue an interagency agreement with the California University, Sacramento. Commencing in November 2024, staff have had meetings with Sacramento State personnel to develop the scope of work and estimated costs within board-approved guidelines. The timeline provides for an anticipated contract execution date of February 3, 2025, and the final report of the study is anticipated to be completed on September 30th, 2025. Moving forward and last to training, 2024 is a required year for all managers and supervisors to take 20 hours of mandatory leadership training. CSLB Business Services sent an announcement to all impacted managers and supervisors of the requirement to take the training. And CSLB managers and supervisors have been provided with the training materials and are in progress with their mandatory leadership training. That concludes the administrative update on personnel and facilities. Back to you, Chair Mark.
Thank you, and I appreciate the information on the report. I think I'm getting some feedback. Appreciate the information on the report, and look forward to seeing that being executed sometime, I think, first quarter 2025. So we are now on page 67 of the packet. IT Chief Jason Perez will provide this update. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Board Chair Mark. On page 69 begins the IT Information Technology update. We are making great progress on our CSLB modernization efforts. Our first one, our Enterprise Content Management System, is going to be our new document management system, which is going to be based on the Box Cloud platform. With this one, we'll be able to find, store, and manage documents easier. Our previous application was an image-based document where I was taking a picture of all of the paper documents that we received. Now we're going to be extracting them and turning them into PDFs. So that too, which is that extraction, transform, and load, is in excess of 24 million documents that we're moving over. Also too, we're also going to improve the security. We're removing and redacting any personable identifiable information, which will include Social Security numbers. So only authorized staff will now be able to pull that information. This application, we're on schedule, and should be done in April of 2025. The other big project that we're working on is our sole owner online application. We have finished the planning of this, and we have started to build the core functionality. One of the big transitions was moving over to a new payment provider, so we will be changing over to a new payment provider for this one, and we are on schedule for that one on May of 2025. Also too, what's also keeping us busy is our legislative updates. We have many legislative updates that are due January 1st, and we are working on those. which is include maybe adjusting of our current systems for licensing exemption thresholds, changing the licensing options for licensing of federally recognized tribes, and also we're also doing some website updates. And also in preparation, the IT staff have been preparing for our independent security assessment conducted by the Department of Military. This assessment will be done in February of 2025, and so we are in preparations for that. So this concludes our IT update. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Is there any board member questions? Registrar Folk has a question.
Yeah, Jason, could you maybe, probably know what I'm going to ask you. Could you explain what we're going to do for these meetings, how we're going to update our equipment? One of the problems we've had at board meetings, our equipment's quite outdated. So we have a plan for the March meeting to maybe have new equipment, and it's not going to cost a lot of money.
Correct. Sorry. Correct. We are purchasing new cameras that will be integrate into the middle of the floor, and we'll be able to capture everybody in the middle. So like in this situation, we'll have 2 cameras, and then it will feed into our online conferencing system. So it also too has a camera and also 2 mics for everybody. So we won't have these.
Thank you for that update. Question, Steve Pinelli.
Quick question on the data transfer that you're going to be doing with, what's the time frame and how long does it take to do that data transfer? Because if you're talking millions of files, what's the
So we started that transfer back in August, and we should be done, crossing our fingers, by the end of next week.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so we're on track.
Congratulations.
Great, thank you. And also, I want to make sure we recognize our former board chair, Susan Grinzello, of the IT committee. She did a lot of work to help steer this thing forward, and I think currently the subcommittee of that is Amanda Gallo, and I'm not sure the second person, but Henry Nutt. Okay, thank you. I know it was really it was real recent. So, any public comment? Okay, seeing none. Moving on. We are going to move to item E, legislation. Leading us through the legislation portion of our meeting is Legislation Committee Chair Joel Barton. Joel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Mark. I'm Joel Barton, Legislative Committee Chair. Let's begin with Legislative Agenda Item 1. Update and discussion regarding implementation of SB 1455 by Ashby, Contractors State License Board Sunset Extension Bill. Agenda Item 1 is an update and discussion regarding the implementation of SB 1455. This item can be found on page 75 of the meeting materials. As you likely remember, SB 1455 extended the board's sunset date from January 1st, 2025 to January 1st, 2029, and made other changes to the contractor's license law. CSLB staff across multiple divisions are working diligently to ensure CSLB seamlessly implements the various provisions of SB 1455 by its January 1st, 2025 effective date. These efforts include, but are not limited to, ensuring the board is ready to process licensing applications from tribes and tribal businesses starting January 1. Training licensing and enforcement staff regarding new processes related to tribal licensure. Ensuring CSLB's examination vendor, PSI, can process direct payments and electronically transmit examination results to CSLB. Processing reimbursement payments for expert investigation cost. Updating procedure manuals. Updating CSLB's website, videos, pamphlets, and other publicly available materials to reflect any changes that affect applicants and licensees. Disseminating industry bulletins to educate applicants and licensees regarding any changes affecting them. Are there any board members' comments or questions on these items? Seeing no further board member comments or questions, let's take public comment. Are there any members of the public wanting to comment on this agenda item, following points? All right, thank you. Let's move on to the next agenda item. Update, discussion, and possible action regarding workers' compensation insurance exemption. Because agenda items 2 through 4 contain legislative proposals for your approval, let me start with a brief update regarding the legislature and upcoming dates and deadlines. The 2025 through 2026 legislative session convened on December 2nd. New and returning legislators are sworn in, held opening ceremonies, introduced bills, and then adjourned until January 6th. Bill introduction season begins on January 6th when the legislators return to Sacramento, and legislators will have until February 21st to introduce bills. Board staff will identify and track any legislation related to CSLB or the contracting profession and provide an update at our next quarterly meeting in March. Rebecca and I hope to maybe get up there beginning of January, maybe meet legislators and tell them what our needs and concerns are. First, item 2A, an update regarding the workers' compensation stakeholder meeting. As you likely remember, SB 1455 delayed the requirement for all licensees to hold workers' compensation insurance policies until January 1st, 2028, and directed CSLB to establish a process for verifying eligibility for a licensee to file an exemption. Accordingly, the two-person Workers' Compensation Insurance Advisory Committee, comprised of Vice Chair Gallarz and myself, drafted a legislative proposal with staff assistance. This draft was shared at a stakeholder meeting on November 19th to gather feedback from industry leaders. The conversation was productive and the comments gathered helped to form the draft proposal up for discussion today. Before we move on to the specific proposal, are there any board member comments or questions regarding the workers' compensation stakeholder meeting, which you should have the minutes of? Seeing no further board member comments or questions, let's take public comment. Are there any members of the public wanting to comment on this agenda item? Yes, sir.
I'm Mark Connerly, Executive Director of the Roofing Contractors Association of California. Happy holidays to all. And I want to thank those who have been involved in this effort for including the prohibition for exemption from the workers' comp requirement for C-39 roofing contractors. That is very important to us, and certainly we appreciate your consideration on that topic. This has been a major initiative for us, fighting the underground economy, fighting insurance fraud for well over 2 decades. And between 11 and 18 or 19 years ago, we passed 3 pieces of legislation dealing with this and mandating that C-39 contractors all have workers' comp. And we believe that those efforts have been successful, at least partially, to the extent they could be. There's obviously still an issue, and we're still fighting it and trying to work with Registrar Report and his staff on the issue. But we believe that to open that little loophole, allowing exemptions, claiming no employees, would really open the dam again and really undermine the efforts, again, that we've undertaken for well over 2 decades. So, again, I appreciate the efforts. I appreciate your recognition of our priorities and our efforts to fight the underground economy. And I would add that as you go forward with trying to create the language to address exemptions for other trades, count on us to be involved, count on us as your partners and to provide input. We're just a call away, and I'm always happy to get involved because we do support it really for all trades. But you know, obviously we're primarily concerned with the C-39. So again, thank you very much.
Again, thank you for your comments and direction even at the stakeholder meeting. So thank you for being here. Are there any other public comments? All right, now let's move on to the proposal itself, agenda item 2B. The draft proposal can be found in the materials on page 79. CSLB recognizes the financial hardship mandatory workers' compensation insurance presents to licensees with no employees who derive no benefit from holding a workers' compensation policy. CSLB also acknowledges the unfair disadvantage contractors have when they file an exemption despite having employees, harming workers and undercutting contractors who follow the rules. Enforcement staff commonly encounter licensees who, despite having employees, have an exemption on file. Further, CSLB recognizes the potential for consumer harm and revenue impact to CSLB resulting from contractors letting their licenses lapse rather than paying for a workers' compensation policy when they do not have workers. These issues were all considered by the advisory committee and staff when drafting this proposal. Specifically, this proposal would allow licensees, except those holding a C-39 roofing classification, to file an exemption from workers' compensation insurance requirements if they do not have employees or undertake construction projects valued at $5,000 or more for labor and materials. This proposal would require the legislature to periodically review and update the $5,000 amount to account for inflation. Notably, this proposal would establish steep penalties for licensees who claim an exemption if it is subsequently determined they do have employees, starting at $10,000 minimum for sole owners and $20,000 minimum for partnerships, LLCs, corporations, and tribal businesses. This proposal would also require licensees at the time of renewal to certify under penalty of perjury that they understand the penalties for violations of workers' compensation requirements. Lastly, this proposal would also prevent renewal or reinstatement for licensees who've been found to have violated these provisions until they procure and maintain a workers' compensation policy. By sponsoring this proposal, the board would authorize staff to find a legislator to carry this bill on behalf of CSLB and negotiate amendments with the legislature as needed. And I think this will be a good, again, like Rebecca and myself will be searching for a legislator to take this on. Now I'd like to turn this over to the board for discussion. Are there any board member comments or questions on this item?
There you go. Yeah, I think this original bill was passed to prevent a lot of fraud going on with the workers' comp, and I'm just concerned that putting a limit on it, how are we going to enforce this? We're going to have to spend a lot of money now that this, you can certify you don't have any employees. So my concern is what's the enforcement to make sure the original bill that we passed is not, the loophole's still not there.
Agreed. Any comment from enforcement? That to put you on the spot, Steve.
I would agree with what Board Member Alan Guy just said. Enforcing it will be complicated.
I just want to add, though, that with the penalties, it was interesting, we did a review of our consumer complaints, and we're getting approximately 1,300 a month, trying to get a little bit less, but we found that over 45%, about 45% of those consumer complaints, the contractor did not have a workers' comp policy. And so what looks promising with this proposal is that would ultimately reduce our complaints, would it not? When somebody is filing a complaint against me with an exemption and the minimum penalty would be $10,000. That's going to reduce complaints if we strictly enforce that, because we know that most of our complaints are filed against contractors that did have workers. That property owner is well aware of who was at their home. So I think that's a real positive. I think there's other things that we're looking at. If you don't want me mentioning this, Chair Mark, we talked about on the website itself, putting a banner on the license where it's prominently displayed, this contractor does not have workers. So I think we would be able to enforce it for the most part. Yes, I agree it's a loophole, but at the same time, if the penalties are greater, that will offset the cost of enforcement. And if you're getting up to a $30,000 fine, that's quite significant. And that is so important, because what we see today is administrative law judges reducing the penalty. I see it because I review the proposed decisions down to $500. Not okay. So it's a risk-reward issue. If you're a contractor, you have workers, you want to falsely file an exemption, you're taking a huge risk with this proposal, because one, the fine is high, Plus, the proposal has you filling out a questionnaire that would make sure that you understand you need workers. And why is that important? Because when we go down to sell our case to the DA, we'll have that. There's no question that that contractor knew they needed workers' comp and they did not have it. It's gonna make it a lot easier to file that case. So that's just kind of, the positive aspects of the proposal.
Yeah,
Through the
thank
chair.
you, Registrar.
Through the chair, I just have the same concern that Alan Guy has. As a licensed contractor, I feel like I'm subsidizing those that are cheating. And it's all in enforcement, and unfortunately, that costs a lot of money too. So it's very expensive to have workers' compensation. And I understand why some people want to skirt the rules, but it's all in enforcement. When you get them, nail them, because I'm subsidizing them.
Yeah, agreed, and that's what Registrar Vogt presented, and that was our intent. As everyone remembers, for our sunset bill, this was kind of a sticking point, so we're kind of, I wouldn't say forced wouldn't be the proper word, but we have to come up with something in the interim. So, we felt that this would be a happy medium to try to get things started.
Through the chair, to David, on the penalty of, the fine of $10,000, does that also include the investigation time and staff's time to actually investigate and process the entire complaint all the way through?
Well, yeah, the $10,000 fine would relate to a citation where you would have a civil penalty. And currently, we don't get cost recovery for citations. However, if we file an accusation, if we think the contractor is going to continue to cheat or violate the law, we do get our cost recovery through an accusation. But that would be separate from the civil penalty, yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Kobos. Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Could you give an example of where a C-39, where they would have an exemption?
Yes, I can, because I've had a number of conversations with C-39 contractors that have argued they should not have to have workers' comp. And the ones that I've spoken to are semi-retired, they've had a roofing business, and now they're focused on simply doing roof repair, small jobs, just trying to supplement their retirement income. We have not verified that to be correct, but that's what the argument is, that you can do roof repair. You can do very small roof projects by yourself. Now, if you're going to be running or doing large re-roofing of homes, you're going to obviously need workers. But that's what's been brought to our attention.
Thank you, Mike. I got a question, and maybe kind of projecting out. You're talking about roof repairs, and I understand that, and maybe there's a valuation there, but when we're looking at roof replacements and change-outs, you're talking major dollars. It's not cheap, and it's going to be a big labor force. Would it be smart to have a minimum amount of a contract that would definitely make it where they have to have workman's comp?
Yeah, I do want to clarify that the proposal, it has an exemption or an exception, if you will, for the roofer. So there would be no ability with the proposal today where you could file an exemption if you're a C-39. So you would have to have workers' comp if you're a roofing contractor, but the other classifications would be able to file for that exemption. A minimum amount, and I think that's one thing we looked at, is the maximum amount. If you're someone that simply does only work for yourself, what would be the valuation of material and labor for the projects that you would perform? When I looked at it, I thought, well, you are going to allow exemptions for painters for doing small painting jobs, perhaps some landscaping and different things, but I don't know that there would be a minimum valuation that you'd have to do work over a certain amount. Right, come January 1st, if the work is valued at less than $1,000, you would not need a license at all. But fortunately, the board was very concerned about that, and you can't hire workers to benefit from that exemption.
So I have a question and some comments. So first off, I appreciate the legislative subcommittee on workers' comp to have that meeting and get some stakeholder input. it's appreciative. I remember myself beforehand, previously I sat on that committee, and there was a lot of conversation on workers' comp and the sunset bill going forward. Some of the concerns that I have currently, originally there was the 4 classifications that were currently today is the requirement: C8, C20, C22, C39, and D49. So that right now, as we're saying, that's a requirement for workers' comp. So what we're proposing is going backwards on those 4 current classifications and saying that they no longer need workers' comp as a requirement, and actually there will be a specific exemption if they choose. And obviously, I appreciate coming forward. There's a lot of penalties. This is one of my key concerns. I know for those classifications, and within this space, the current maximum is $5,000, right? In my opinion, that is too high for those classifications, because at some point in time, for specifically C20, there was a reason why there was a mandatory workers' comp, and that was one of the first classifications to have that. I know there was a lot of discussion after watching that meeting or listening to the meeting and reading the minutes that a lot of other consumers thought that 5,000 was too high as an exemption. So in my opinion, if as a board we're going to move forward with this, I think it needs to be lower. What Registrar Report said, $1,000 is our current limit for licensees. In my opinion, and when I first heard this, I was throwing around maybe 2,000, 2,500. That means someone can certify that they do not have workers' comp, they don't have no employees, then they could do their maximum job of 2,500. Currently, as written, it's $5,000. So I'd like to hear some feedback on that portion.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the limit currently is $500 for a license, which would assume same for workers' comp. So when it was $500 4 years ago, we had this fraud going on. So I think just changing the level of what we're requiring, we're going to go back, it actually promotes more fraud because it allows a bigger job. I didn't realize that fine doesn't go back to CSLB. Sounds like it goes to state general fund. So I think if we're going to consider some sort of exemption, we need to figure out a way to fund a very big investigative unit under Steve to make sure this stuff is being followed. Whether it's another bond, a fee to file the workers' comp exemption. I mean, there was a talk about auditing the records here at some point. Maybe that's up front, but I think this is a big cost for investigation to make sure this is done properly. We tried to eliminate this 3 or 4 years ago, and I don't think we should back down from trying to reform the fraud that's going on in this industry.
I do want to clarify if I misspoke, though. The civil penalties would go back to CSLB.
Okay.
So yes, we would collect those.
I think one of the intents is that there's so many, when you're dealing with undocumented and or EDD, that there are some fairly straightforward gotcha moments. For instance, if somebody goes in and says I was an employee, and they go to EDD and ask for unemployment insurance, that's a trigger for CSLB to automatically say, you have somebody who's filing unemployment, and you claim not to have any employees. That's a gotcha moment for that contractor, and clearly part of the test of the 5 questions or 10 questions that they have to pass are going to be the rules of employment, so that they have clarity as to what is an independent contractor. Is this person an independent contractor? Wrong. Start over again. And so they cannot pass go until they answer the question right. And once they answer it right, then they're swearing under the penalty of perjury that they understand that that question is right. There is no such thing as an independent contractor in construction. Full stop. EDD will tell you that. FTB will tell you that. The IRS will tell you that. Now CSLB is telling you that. And I think that there are multiple ways in which the agency, without a whole lot of investigative effort, will be able to track these and capture these flagrant violators through existing agencies that have already mutual understanding agreements with CSLB.
And that's a great point, Miguel. Is CSLB currently notified by EDD if said a complaint or EDD unemployment comes in place and that to a specific contractor, to what Miguel stated? If someone applies for unemployment insurance and then they're saying they don't have workers' comp, does that information get to CSLB?
We have a memorandum of understanding with EDD, and it's something we're in the process currently of renegotiating, but the answer is if they make a finding that is electronically transferred to CSLB, it generally results in a suspension of the license for unpaid tax withholding. But as far as sharing of information, it is shared through the Joint Enforcement Strike Force, of which Steve is our liaison. Now, unfortunately, there's so much of this occurring today that it hasn't been a top priority, Steve, you can correct me on this, for our staff to be able to enforce that. Now, one tool that we currently have, and I don't have the statistics available for this meeting, but if we find a contractor has workers and no workers' comp, by operation of law, we can suspend the license. And you see a lot of that at our intake mediation center. So that's all something that can be looked at, will continue to be looked at, and it comes down to the prioritization of our resources at CSLB.
I have a question for Miguel. I'm just wondering if you could give some examples as to why those various organizations that you just named do not consider independent contractors.
Well, it's from my understanding of the rules of employment. So the rules of employment, the ABCs of contracting is, number one, I'm telling you where to show up. That's an employment clause. If I'm telling you you need to start at 7 and you end at 3:30 and you get a 1-hour lunch, and I'm telling you to build that fence, those are rules of employment. So those are clearly defined in EDD as that is not an independence. Number one. Number two, if you don't have a contractor's license, you're not independent, you're an employee.
Okay.
So there are very strict standards. And then, now, those of us in the commercial world, in public works arena, we understand this, but those that are doing residential work, if you're going to, if you're going to Home Depot or Lowe's and picking up a additional supplemental workforce, none of them file EDD. Everyone has 1099s. Every single person that they bring on is a 1099 employee because they don't want to pay taxes on the cash wages that they paid out, because that's what they're doing. They're paying cash wages at the end of the day. That's an expense. I'm not going to eat that expense. I'm going to file a 1099 and move that expense to them. And so that's where IRS says, where's your 1099 filings? What are the addresses? What are the social security numbers? They don't match. They don't connect. And so all of a sudden it blows up on them. And then EDD will say, these are employees. You now need to pay unemployment insurance for them. That's the first phase, and then obviously workman's comp and FTB, IRS. So they all come after the contractor after that point.
Thank you, Joel. But I think, obviously from our sunset bill, and appreciate Ms. Past Chair Love, all the hard work on the sunset bill. Moving forward, as everyone understands, currently it's January 1st, 2028, where all licensees need workers' comp. So what we're talking about today is trying to figure out the best approach to file some sort of exemption for workers' comp for these licensees. What we're talking about is potential $5,000 maximum for these licensees that self-certify that they have no employees. Again, in my opinion, that could be a really big electrical job. That could be a good-sized plumbing job, right? So, if me as a board, that's a really big heating and air conditioning job. So it could be more, and the whole purpose of that, for having a C20 being exempt, was because there was so much underground activity in that space. So as for the consumers of California, and I'll repeat what David Folk said, for Jason Perez, is like, if the board chooses to do something like this, we need to make sure the consumers know what the maximum is allowable for this contractor. So that way all the contractors, it's kind of like self-certifying for themselves. They know you could only do a $2,500 job, period, on the website. And then that way, the consumer, when they look them up, they know they can only do a $2,500 job. In big picture, like, I appreciate all the hard work on this, but like, I think that maximum is too high currently.
You know, you said something there that triggered something in the back of my head here. Yeah, it is a big job, $5,000, that's a lot. Water heaters, you know, for instance, replacements. But again, if they don't have a license, and they're doing this without a license, they're not gonna be able to get that permit to get that inspected. So I don't know how you go there and put an amount. I don't like the amount, to be honest with you. I wish it was a lot lower, like 250, not at 5,000. And those are small little repairs maybe that somebody's doing, replacing a faucet, or maybe changing out an outlet or whatever. It's minimal, it's not something that needs to be really looked at. But when you start getting higher and higher, people start doing, well, I only did this part on this job and only charged $4,000. Well, then I came back 2 weeks later and I did this part of this job and I did $4,000. And then 2 weeks later I did this part of the job was $4,000. Yeah, he did $12,000 worth of work, but he did it over a month and a half and he did $12,000 worth of work. So he stayed underneath the $5,000 mark. I don't like it. I think it's a bad move. And that's just my own opinion on it, because I'm looking at it from an enforcement side, where I'm at, and how people could skate around it by using certain ways to make things work out. Having a contract with somebody to do all this work, but to piecemeal it all together and make it where it's really low. So they can make that mark of $5,000 a lot lower than $5,000.
And that's for our board discussion. Like, this is a proposed legislation that our board would have to sponsor. So if our board members feel like that 5,000 max is too high, then we need to be discussing it. We could have that lower. This is just proposed from Chief of Legislation Rebecca may help put this together with the Workers' Comp Committee. So with that, I'll stop, because I know there's some other questions, I think.
Maybe more comments, and I'd be happy to. And I know Miguel and I worked a long time on this, and as you all recall, this is to get our Sunset Bill extension. So this is negotiations pretty much. I mean, I was against any of it, but I wanted to come up with something to get us to continue on, to be palatable to legislation. So I'm happy to take amendments to further this. And after public comment, of course, and after more board comment. But I think this is just get us through, and I want to thank Rebecca for putting me in touch, and I know we'll be working on this with legislators as far as the state workers' compensation fund, because I feel they have to come up with a way where everybody's required to have it, and there should be a way you put like a $2,000 or $1,000 a down payment, or the total fund, and if you prove throughout that year you didn't employ anybody, you get that back or something. So they would, in my opinion, get a slew of applicants using their fund, and if they didn't use it, they'd get it back. So that's kind of what I was looking at. So any other comments from the board before to go to public comment?
Just another question. I noticed in some of the proposed language here that there are obviously the progressive fine amounts up to a maximum of $30,000 per instance. I'm just curious about, and Registrar Folk mentioned earlier that at a certain point, or at any point really, a contractor's license could be suspended. So I'm curious about, for repeat violators, right? Because it sounds, my understanding is that this is an ongoing issue over the past several years. At what point is a contractor's license revoked and or suspended indefinitely? Because it sounds like we can continue to fine them if they're violating this proposed legislation. But at what point from a consumer protection perspective, is this particular contractor violating the law in multiple instances? What point does that stop?
Yeah, if I could, that's a very good question, thank you. It was probably about 4 years ago that we did have some budget difficulties at CSLB, and at that time, we were focusing more on issuing administrative citations than accusations. Now, with our budget being where it's at, that is not the case today, and I want to be real clear to any contractors that think it's okay to get repeated complaints, it's not. And so the administrative fine that we're talking about would be an administrative citation only, as I mentioned earlier, and it's a situation where we're going to require that contractor show that they have workers' comp after they've been fined. So you're not likely to see repeat offenders. But one thing I've been working very closely with Steve on, and with his leadership in the enforcement division, if we believe a contractor is going to reoffend, we do not want to issue that administrative citation. We want to go to an accusation. The accusation is to suspend or revoke the license, and it puts a contractor on probation. It requires a disciplinary bond. We can recover our investigative costs. And moving forward, that's what we got to focus on, because we're receiving too many complaints. We want less complaints. We want people to hire a licensed contractor, have an enjoyable, satisfactory experience with that, and not have to file a complaint. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Registrar Folkton, correct me if I'm right, how we do it. I believe Board Member Galarza came up with, they're going to be required to sign something in penalty of perjury that they have workers' comp.
Yeah, and I don't know that it was mentioned, but one of the advantages to the proposal as well is that it would roll the 2028 date back to 2027 for, having contractors be required to have it. But yeah, it's, as far as that form, that's going to be so helpful in filing a complaint with the district attorney. We didn't talk about it today, but there's a grant program that the Department of Insurance funds prosecution of workers' comp fraud. And one of the barriers that you have when you go down to file your complaint is the deputy DA will say, well, did the contractor really understand they needed to have workers? With that form, you walk into the DA's office, show them the form, they knew it, they signed it, they took this 10-question test. There's no question about it, they need to get prosecuted.
Thank you, Registrar Folk. Any comments, further comments or questions from board members? Yes.
I'm assuming that those questions will be done in multiple languages, right?
You are correct. We will make sure that happens.
I just want to say that I'm in support of Mr. Barton's, if he decides to do another type of a proposal about putting money in a fund and then at the end, the contractor getting their monies back. I think that that's a great idea. People like to have their money back, so they generally abide by the rules.
Thank you, Board Member Love. All right, any more comments or questions from the board?
I think there was also one stipulation that mentions, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if a contractor is found in violation, they have pretty much revoked their opportunity to ever file an exemption moving forward. So, so that is a draconian step, but intended to, you can stop being a contractor. But you've already proven that you don't understand the concept of exemption.
All right, thank you. Any further board comments? All right, seeing no further board member comments or questions, let's take public comment. Are there any members of the public wanting to comment on the agenda item?
Thank you. I'm Rick Piers. I'm forwarding this message from Phil Vermeulen. He is on the webcast, but doesn't have a way to verbally put. So here's his statement, and I actually have two, but I'll go after. The first one is on behalf of the Flasher Barricade Association. While they're disappointed in the postponement of the 2026 date, they strongly support the proposal. That's from the Flasher Barricade Association. Okay. I'm Phil's secretary sometimes. This is also for Phil Vermeulen, but this is on behalf of HCC, the American Contractors Indemnity, who write a large portion of the bonds for licensed contractors. They are offering to look forward. They look forward to discussing the idea of requiring an additional bond, if that is so thought out, and they haven't had the opportunity to discuss it, but look forward to meeting with the registrar and interested parties about a possible bond that could be used in some situation.
Thank you.
Good morning. Richard Marcus, and I represent a variety of specialty subcontractors, including C7, C10, C16, C36, Western Electrical Contractors, Plumbing, Heating, Cooling Contractors of California. Like Phil, I think my clients are disappointed at moving backwards. They supported the initial legislation to do away with the contractor exemption. And the other thing, to Board Member Ruane's comments, unfortunately, it's the legitimate contractors that are paying for the investigation and the penalties. And although the $10,000 penalty for failure to have workers' compensation is persuasive on the surface, I would remind the board that DLSE only collects about 15 to 20% of wage and hour penalties that are assessed for wage and hour violations. And so my guess is, and this is not based upon any study of what the potential outcome will be, is I will be surprised if the board collects more than 10 to 20% of any penalties that are assessed for failure to have workers' compensation. So I'm not sure that revenue is going to support the investigation part of it. And finally, I know this was an issue that was very important to Senator Dodd and to Senator Ashby to resolve this, but I've not heard a single complaint from any of the members of any of my contractor associations about doing away with the exemption provision. And that's obviously going to be a factor based upon the size of the organizations and who belongs. There's a tremendous population of the contractor community that don't belong to trade associations. But I would be curious to know, aside from probably a couple of very vocal constituents that had the ears of some of the senators or members of the legislature, how big of a problem this is for the contractor community. And I'm certainly sympathetic for somebody who is truly a sole practitioner that is primarily doing service and repair and is not going out to Home Depot or anywhere to 1099 a bunch of folks to assist them in it. And I'm sympathetic when they realize what a minimum premium workers' compensation policy is for no benefit whatsoever. But without knowing the details of how big of a population is going to be, conceivably dropping their contractor license because of this requirement, this may be premature to pursue this. Thanks.
Thank you for that comment. Any other comments or questions? All right, as a reminder, the Legislative Committee did not have time to meet prior to this board meeting. Therefore, a motion and a second is required for all legislative voting items. Would a board member like to make a motion to support the board's sponsorship of a legislative proposal to allow for an exemption from the workers' compensation requirement, or with the chair's approval, an amendment for the motion?
I would like to make some amendments to the written proposal. So just from hearing the discussion here today, appreciate all the board members' discussion. It sounds like there is, we have to move forward. Sunset legislation is trying to make sure there is some sort of exemption forward. Appreciate all the hard work. We got to do something. I think what was clear was being able to push this exemption date was the 27th of January 1st, which was great. I still think the maximum limit is too high. If it's a single person, that maximum limit should be, in my opinion, in the $2,000 range. So I'll make the motion to approved as presented with the amendment of the maximum being $2,000.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Mark. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion. Kobos.
Thank you. Are there any discussion on the amendment to the motion? We have a regularly moved second, and do I have a call for the question? That would be to vote on it, or,
Call for the question.
okay.
Diana Love.
All right, thank you. So, thank you. Robin, would you please take a roll call vote?
Chair Barton, I think you should ask for public comment on the amendment.
Well, thank you,
just to
sir.
correct
All right, is there the public comment on the amendment to the motion, which would be decreasing the value from $5,000 to $2,000?
Rick Pierce, representing Basic Crafts Workers' Comp Program. We strongly support the idea of lowering it to $2,000.
Thank you.
Mark Connerly, Roofing Contractors Association of California again. I would respectfully ask that it be lowered to 1,000 to remain consistent with the new limit for maintaining a license. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that comment. Any other comments from the public? All right, it stands on the floor with amendment to the motion, which is lowering the amount from $5,000 to $2,000. Robin, would you please take a roll call vote?
Sure. Before I vote, the motion is to approve as presented with an amendment of decreasing what amount exactly? What is the amount, the limit of what?
The amendment, or the motion would be approve as presented with the maximum allowable to actually do work, exemption work of $2,000.
Okay.
And my request, if this is passed, is IT, specifically make sure this is noted on the public website that this particular contractor can only do work up to $2,000 because they are saying they are exempt
Okay.
from workers' comp.
Thank you.
And all the other stipulations apply. That's the only change to the motion.
And that maximum value is in 7125B on page 79 of the materials.
Okay. Ready?
I'm ready.
Michael Mark,
Yes.
Miguel Galarza,
Aye.
Alan Guy,
No.
Joel Barton,
Yes.
Rodney Cobos.
Aye.
Amanda Gallo has an excused absence. Jacob Lopez has an excused absence. Diana Love.
Aye.
Henry Nutt.
Aye.
Steve Pinelli.
No.
Joseph Preciado.
Aye.
Jim Ruane.
No.
Thomas Ruiz and Mary Tyker both have excused absences. Motion passes 7-3.
Thank you, board members. And thank you very much for your discussion, and this will be ongoing.
Okay, can I make a few comments? I appreciate I think one of the issues too is because of the minimum being raised to $1,000 come January 1st, we got kind of stuck in a hard spot. So that was why my amendment was for 2,000, just double what the minimum was currently. So thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Mark. All right, now moving on to the next item on our agenda. Review, discussion, and possible action on 2025 proposed legislation. Agenda item 3 consists of legislative proposals for the board to consider sponsoring in 2025. Again, by sponsoring these proposals, the board will authorize staff to find a legislator to carry these proposals on behalf of CSLB and will negotiate amendments with the legislature as needed. Between each item, I will call for the members to discuss and take public comment. Starting with agenda item 3A, a proposal to add accessory dwelling units, also known as ADUs, to the definition of home improvement and contractors law. This proposal can be found in the materials on page 87. As you are certainly aware, CSLB has received a significant number of consumer file complaints regarding contractors failing to complete ADU construction projects. These complaints allege a contractor was paid for work that was not completed and materials that were not delivered, causing significant financial harm. CSLB held a legislative committee meeting on September 18th to hear from the public regarding ways to improve consumer protection in contractors' law, and this proposal reflects those discussions. ADUs are not expressly mentioned in contractors' law, but are defined in the government code as an attached or detached residential dwelling unit providing complete independent living on a lot with a proposed or existing primary residence. By adding ADUs to the definition of home improvement in contractors' law, we can ensure contractors engaging in ADU projects are subject to existing rules regarding how they can collect payment from consumers. Contractors are prohibited from charging a down payment of more than $1,000 or 10% of a home improvement contract, whichever is less. Contractors can establish a payment schedule for the balance of what they are owed, but cannot request or accept payments that exceed the value of the work performed or materials delivered. These payment requirements are generally referred to as progress payments. Including ADUs in the definition of home improvement will provide additional consumer protection by clearly requiring contractors to adhere to the same progress payment rules for ADUs as they do for other home improvement projects. Now I would like to turn this over to the board for discussion. Are there any board member comments or questions on this item?
I have a question. So ADUs, I deal with them a lot, and there's different types of ADUs that you have, and it's not considered, I don't consider them home improvement because it's not part of the home, it's part of the lot. But when you're talking about 10% or $1,000 as the minimum, whichever's less, when you're looking at an ADU and you have something that's already been manufactured that cost $150,000 and all they're doing is taking it and dropping it into a location, that $1,000 is not even be close to being enough for that to happen. So I don't know how you get to $1,000 or 10% is never going to be less than $1,000, so it's always going to be $1,000. I don't know how you get to that amount and making it where the contractor's getting enough to actually make sure that that progress of what they need to do to build or put that ADU on site has enough to get that started, even to move forward, or, you know, to get that going. I mean, even just the plans alone cost more than $1,000 to get that even drawn up. So I don't know how that works out where the $1,000 comes into play and not just a straight 10% to make it work both ways.
Yeah.
Registrar Report.
Excuse me, if I could touch on that. That is one concern, is where the ADU is on the property and not connected to the home itself. And so this would clarify that if it's residential, if it's zoned residential, that we would consider that ADU to be in a way an extension of the existing house, and the home improvement contract requirements would apply. So that's one thing this bill would do. We know that many building departments, perhaps most, would consider an ADU to be new construction, and that's done for the purposes, from what I've seen, of collecting different types of taxes and fees. But as far as the second question, we have a significant problem with ADU here in the state of California. There's just no question about it. We've had one contractor, Steve, reported that we've received more than 300 complaints. And when we look at the complaints themselves, the majority of these consumers have paid the contract price in full, or at least 80% of it, and they have no ADU, or they have nothing to show for it. The plans are an issue. What we're proposing, and what I would like for Board Member Pinelli to assist with, is to create a video. He mentioned the plans. What is the value of the plans? That is so important. The problem, though, with the plans is, does the consumer have possession of them? I've been told that many building departments provide plans at no cost, but we don't always know that. So we need to have some idea as to when payment can be made. When should payment of the plans be made? Should the consumer be in possession of those plans? Can they actually get them from the building department if the contractor is the one that submitted them? We need to address that. And we also understand that they could be pre-manufactured, and that does pose a problem. We also know many contractors have revolving accounts. What we know right now is we have a tremendous problem where we have a lot of consumers that have lost their life savings because they paid money for something that they do not have, and we need to get those cases prosecuted. Taking $200,000 from a consumer for the purpose of providing an ADU and not providing an ADU, in my opinion, is a criminal offense. And so that's what this law would do. This proposal will tighten this up. Currently, if you request or accept payments in advance of work performed for home improvement, that's a misdemeanor. One of the problems is you go down to file the case, the DAs aren't all that receptive to it because there probably won't be any jail time. I don't know if we talked about that, but this would assist with this. This would put a minimum, like it's 10 days in jail, I think we talked about. That would be so powerful to go down to a DA and say, here's a solid case. You could look at the felony aspect of it, which is 44B of the Business Professions Code. That's where you receive money and you divert it to another use. But short of that, is straightforward. The contract provided for a payment that violated the law, the contractor accepted it. If nothing else, we need the misdemeanor conviction.
Thank
Two
you,
things.
Registrar Report. Oh, sorry. Two things. One, I understand exactly what you're saying. I agree with you. I think there has to be some communication with the consumers of the steps of payment, the steps of monies, and the steps of how you go about going forward and moving forward with certain aspects of, one, the job card or the permit or the plan, or whatever you're doing, and to know how those steps are. Because like you're saying, a lot of people, here's $200,000 and we're gonna start doing this, and they come back and there's just a pad of concrete and nothing else there. And the person's gone. So knowing that, you know, there's these steps, because we make contractors look, you know, where I'm from in San Francisco, consumers look to the permit of, did it meet this stage, did it meet that stage? Just like banks, they don't give back out, you know, they'll do a loan and they'll fund half of it, and when you hit a certain stage and they show the movement on permits and everything that's moved forward, then the rest of the money is released for them to complete a project. So I think consumers need to know that as well. The second part I was gonna say, was you mentioned, was being a part of the home, attached to the home. These ADUs, if they have a separate address, you know, how's it addressed? Is it separate? Is it part of that parcel? Is it separate from that parcel? Can the person turn around and have that ADU and make it where it's its own entity and becomes its own thing? Then all of a sudden now you come into a different realm. So just gotta be careful on that, because when we say it's a part of the home, when I'm hearing it's a part of the home, that means it's attached to that home. It's actually a part of that, where you can access it from that home, through that home, as a part of that home. Not its own entrance, not its own, you know, egresses and all that, where it's a separate entity. So we gotta make sure, if we're saying it's a part of that home, that it doesn't have to, it can be detached, it can be separated from it. So just the definitions on how we, you know, put it with codes and verbiage and how it all relates to each other is important piece of that puzzle. And I would love to help you out with that video if you want, and talking to consumers would be, I think it's a helpful thing, because a lot of people have no clue what's happening.
Yes, and your assistance would be vital in crafting this legislation, fine-tuning it. And our video developer is Amy Lawrence in the back, so maybe we make this a priority to put a video together for ADU to protect consumers and put it on our website.
One comment, I think, for the video and recommendations, it's almost two different tracks. I see the ADUs going, right? It's traditional, I call it stick-built, where the contractor builds it on site, and then there's off-site manufacturing. I'm guessing there's probably more fraud in the off-site manufacturing, because these folks presenting it don't actually have a factory, so it's almost like two payment guidelines. One is if they're building on site, two is if they're promising you they're gonna show up with a crane and drop this in one day. So there's different payment methods, a lot of those plans already pre-done, so there's different kind of payment recommendations I would think we'd wanna make for both those scenarios.
If I could, through the chair, what Alan just said, it's true, and a lot of that happens. And as part of the video as well, if you would like, just putting in the back of your head so you remember, the problem you have is when people are buying these ADUs or these module units or these roll-up units that you can just plop down, they don't realize that, you know, electricity and sewer and water and all, you know, gas if needed, is not there, and it has to be brought to those. A lot of people think, oh, I got this whole unit and I drop it in place and plug it in and we're good to go. It doesn't work that way. So there's a lot of other things that happen, and I'm sure, I know 100% that a lot of the complaints you probably have are people going, oh, we bought this ADU from contractor A, they built it, they put it on a slab and it's all in the back, and they left. But when we went to go flush the toilet, there was no water, and when we went to, when we went to turn on the electricity, there was no power. Well, they said they'll build you the ADU, but they didn't do the sewer, they didn't do the water, they didn't do the electricity. They don't want to deal with, the municipalities and they're just putting the unit, and they're leaving everything else up to you. So I think that's another part that has to be clarified to the consumer, saying, if you're doing A, you want to make sure B and C are a part of it as well, because if you don't, A is not going to work. So we got to make sure that that's part of it. So there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle. It's just breaking it all down and making sure it's easily understood. So I'm willing to help any way you need, Dave.
Through the chair, if I may, I really like the idea of the video, and I'd like to see if we could work to make that actually an integral part for the consumer of the permitting process. So it's not just look at CSLB and they have this video and that's great, but when you go in to sign up and say, this is what we're planning on doing, by the way, part of the process is you listen to this and you watch this, so you're educated, so.
All right, thank you, Board Member Ruin. Any other comments or questions from the board? All right, are there any other questions or comments from the public?
Good morning again, Rick Pierce, forwarding a message from Phil Vermeulen. The Flashing Barricade Association supports the ADU proposal.
Thank you very much. All right, seeing no members of the public, would a board member like to make a motion to support the board's sponsorship of a legislative proposal to add accessory dwelling units to the definition of home improvement?
So moved.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Second for discussion. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, we have a call for the question. Let's to vote on it.
Call the question.
All right, thank you. The question's been called. Robin, would you take the roll, please?
Michael Mark,
Yes.
Miguel Galarza,
Aye.
Alan Guy,
Aye.
Joel Barton,
Aye.
Rodney Cobos,
Aye.
Amanda Guy has an excused absence, and Jacob Lopez has an excused absence. Diana Love,
Aye.
Henry Nutt,
Aye.
Steve Pinelli,
Quick question. This is considered permanent, correct? The ADUs are considered permanent, not placed right now and then moved in a month from now.
That is the way we look at our licensed spas, being
Okay.
permanent, not readily removable.
Then aye. Aye.
Joseph Preciado,
Aye.
Jim Ruane,
Aye.
Thomas Ruiz, and Mary Tucker both have excused absences. Motion passes 10-0.
And thank you, board members, and thank you for all your comments and questions. Shows how committed this board is to protecting the public and taking everything into consideration. Well, now moving on to the next item on our agenda is item 3B, which is related to the ADU proposal we just discussed, but has its own agenda number because it would apply to all individuals who violate progress payment laws, not just those working on ADUs. Accordingly, it is appropriate for the board to discuss this proposal separately and take a separate motion and vote to approve it. CSLB enforcement staff find that some licensees fail to abide by progress payment laws and then fail to complete or even start the work they agreed to, causing significant financial harm. This proposal would strengthen existing administrative penalties to discourage would-be offenders from taking excessive payments and failing to deliver the work or materials outlined in their contract. Specifically, this proposal would subject individuals, both licensed or unlicensed, who violate progress payment provisions to a $10,000 fine if the violation causes financial injury to a consumer in an amount greater than 10% of the contract price. It also subjects licensees to potential revocation for violations of progress payment provisions. Now I would like to turn this over to the board for discussion. Are there any board member comments or questions on this item? All right, seeing no board member comments or questions, let's take public comment. Are there any members of the public wanting to comment on this agenda item?
That would be the floor for assessing the $10,000 penalty is 10%. Suppose the contract was a $5,000 project, and thus the damages would only be $500 to trigger the $10,000 penalty, which is twice the amount of the contract. And the reason that I thought of this was since handymen are now exempt, but since they're considered to be an unlicensed worker, even the $1,000 maximum that they could do they could conceivably be assessed a $10,000 penalty if the consumer asserted that they were damaged by $100. And I'm just wondering if there's an explanation or a rationale, or maybe anyway, when I was reading the proposal, those were my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Registrar Fogg?
Yeah, one thing we didn't put in the packet is the board has adopted complaint prioritization guidelines. We do prioritize certain types of complaints, and one is complaints that result in egregious harm. So when we talk about the 10%, our thought there is it's going to be for the more serious matters. Now, if contractors taking a small dollar contract and cause minimal harm, especially if it's within the parameters of the license bond, it's probably not, for a first offense, that's likely not going to result in an administrative action. But we need to have something in place where the contractor has, in fact, taken, one case that I looked at very carefully, where they took $70,000 and did not do any work. They did nothing towards the project. Well, we need something to go in and tell, to support our administrative action, but also to help the district attorneys understand that we are prioritizing the referrals to them. I hope that answers your question, but we have to use discretion, use good judgment in how we handle our consumer complaints with the limited resources that we do have.
Thank you, Registrar Fogg. Any other members of the public? Seeing none, would a board member like to make a motion to support the board's sponsorship?
Motion to approve.
All right.
Second.
I got the motion and second. All right, is there any discussion? All right, would anyone like to call for the question?
Call the question.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. All right, Robin, would you call the roll?
Michael Mark,
Yes.
Miguel Galarza,
Aye.
Alan Guy,
Aye.
Joel Barton,
Aye.
Rodney Cobos,
Aye.
Amanda Gallo and Jacob Lopez both have excused absences. Diana Love.
Aye.
Henry Nutt.
Aye.
Steve Pinelli.
Aye.
Joseph Preciado.
Aye.
Jim Ruane.
Aye.
Thomas Ruiz and Mary Tucker both have excused absences. Motion passes 9-1.
Thank you, Robin, and thank you, board members. Now moving on to the next item on our agenda. Item 3C is a proposal to raise enforcement fine minimums. The proposal can be found in the materials on page 92. This issue was included in the board's 2023 Sunset Review Report, which was approved by the board on December 13, 2023, but a solution was not ultimately included in the board's Sunset Review Bill, SB 1455. While CSLB's maximum enforcement fine amounts are clearly established in the statute, minimum enforcement fines are non-existent, or in the case of citing for unlicensed practice, exceedingly low when compared to the maximum amount, $200 versus $15,000. This results in administrative law judges, ALJs, frequently and significantly reducing fines during citation appeals. To put this in perspective, fine amounts for citations issued in fiscal year 2023 to 2024 that under appeal are being lowered by approximately 50%. These reductions result in fines that are not commensurate with the violation, do not adequately support enforcement division workload, do not provide an incentive to comply with the contractor's law, and provide minimal ability for the board to recuperate the cost of litigating an administrative citation. Specifically, this proposal would establish enforcement fine minimums commensurate with recent statutory maximum increases and require future increases to minimum fine amounts to be based on increases to the Consumer Price Index every 5 years. Now I would like to turn this over to the board for discussion. Are there any board member comments or questions on this item? All right, seeing none, no further board member comments. Let's take public comment. Are there any members of the public wanting to comment on this agenda item? All right, would a board member like to make a motion?
Motion to approve staff recommendation.
All right, we got that. We got the regular moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? To sponsor, thank you. All right. support the board's sponsorship. Thank you for that, Ms. May. So the motion is the board's sponsorship of a legislative proposal, and we got a regularly moved and second, and any discussion on the motion? All right, do I call for the question?
Motion's called. Call the question.
Thank you, Chair Mark. All right, Robin, would you please take the roll?
Who is the second motion?
Me.
Michael Mark,
Aye.
Miguel Galarza,
Aye.
Alan Guy,
Aye.
Joel Barton,
Aye.
Rodney Cobos.
Aye.
Amanda Gallo and Jacob Lopez both have excused absences. Diana Love. Henry Nutt.
Aye.
Steve Pinelli.
Aye.
Joseph Preciado.
Aye.
Jim Ruane.
Aye.
Thomas Ruiz and Mary Tucker both have excused absences. Motion passes 10-0.
Thank you, board members. On to agenda item 3D, which is a proposal regarding attorney fees on claims against a cash deposit in lieu of a surety bond. This proposal can be found in the materials on page 95. Like the previous proposal, this issue was also identified in the board's 2023 Sunset Review Report and approved by the board on December 13, 2023, but not included in the board's Sunset Review Bill SB 1455. This proposal would expressly provide that CSLB is not liable for attorney fees in civil actions involving a contractor's cash deposit on a licensed bond. Contractors are required to maintain a contractor's bond for damages resulting from defective construction or other contractor's law violations. Contractors who do not want to use a surety company for their required license bond may make a cash deposit to CSLB to meet this requirement. Contractors' law prohibits CSLB from releasing any portion of the deposit for any purpose in a civil action unless directed by the court. In 2023, a Deputy Attorney General representing CSLB in a routine cash deposit in lieu of bond case alerted CSLB that an appellate court case known as the Carton case was being used to argue that CSLB should be liable for a consumer attorney's fees in a civil case against a contractor. The consumer's attorney asked the court to treat CSLB as a surety while CSLB holds a cash deposit for defendant contractors, exposing CSLB to potential liability. Although CSLB is not a surety and must not release a deposit or any portion of it except by court order, this proposed statutory amendment is meant to prevent any potential allegations that CSLB might be liable for attorney fees or costs in cash deposit cases. There are approximately 300 cash deposits on file for which CSLB would be held liable for attorney's fees in civil cases in which CSLB is simply complying with the law by awaiting instruction from the court. This exposure is contrary to the policy and purpose behind cash deposits, which is simply to provide contractors who do not want to use a surety company with another way to comply with the contractor's bond requirement. Now I would like to turn this over to the board for discussion. Are there any board members' comments or questions on this item? All right, seeing none. Are there any public comments on this item? All right, would a board member like to make a motion to support the board's sponsorship of a legislative proposal to specify CSLB is not liable for attorney fees in civil claims involving a contractor's cash deposit on a licensed bond?
So moved. Cobos.
Second.
We have a second. All right, any discussion on the motion? All right, any call for the question?
Call for the question.
Thank you. Ms. Love, the question's been called. Robin, would you please take the roll call vote?
Michael Mark,
Yes.
Miguel Galarza,
Aye.
Alan Guy,
Yes.
Joel Barton,
Aye.
Rodney Cobos.
Aye.
Amanda Gallo and Jacob Lopez both have excused absences. Diana Love. Henry Nutt.
Aye.
Steve Pinelli.
Aye.
Joseph Preciado.
Aye.
Jim Ruane.
Aye.
Thomas Ruiz and Mary Tucker both have excused absences. Motion passes 10-0.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, board members. On to the next item on our agenda, review, discussion, and possible action on 2025 proposed non-substantive updates to contractor state license law. Agenda items 4A through D are related to non-substantive updates to contractors law and can be found in the materials on page 101. Each year, the Senate Business Professions and Economic Development Committee authors a bill to make minor revisions to statutes related to the programs under the Department of Consumer Affairs. This bill is commonly known as the Omnibus Bill. Because this bill deals with more programs than just CSLB, any proposals included should be non-controversial, minor, and at no cost. The Omnibus Bill provides CSLB with a valuable opportunity to identify and correct errors of inconsistencies within contractors' law, therefore minimizing confusion for staff and the public and enhancing compliance among licensees and applicants. This proposal would make 4 non-substantive minor changes to contractors' law. First, it clarifies that a violation of advertising requirements for motor vehicles registered with CSLB is cause for discipline. While CSLB has explicit authority to enforce its laws, clarifying the board's authority within this section will minimize confusion and support compliance among licensees. Second, this proposal conforms existing statute establishing an inactive license status by specifying workers' compensation insurance is not required for inactive licensees. Licensees who hold an inactive license status are prohibited from performing construction work that requires an active license and accordingly do not need to maintain the same requirements as an active license. This includes maintaining a current workers' compensation policy or a workers' compensation policy exemption on file with CSLB at all times. While the provisions related to workers' compensation insurance already exclude inactive licensees, workers' compensation is not mentioned in provisions establishing an inactive status. Third, CSLB's recent sunset bill, SB 1455, provided that licensees subject to a workmanship complaint resulting in a letter of admonishment or a citation are required to reimburse CSLB's industry expert costs to investigate the complaint. This proposal clarifies the reimbursement is not due until the citation or letter of admonishment is final, ensuring CSLB is not requesting or collecting a reimbursement when the citation or letter of admonishment is under appeal or if it is withdrawn or dismissed by CSLB. Lastly, this proposal corrects a mislettered cross-reference in contractors' law regarding home improvement salesperson. Unlike the previous proposals we voted to sponsor, the Senate Business Professions and Economic Development Committee is a sponsor of the Omnibus Bill, so we're only voting to submit this proposal to the committee, not to sponsor it. Now I would like to turn this over to the board for discussion. Are there any board member comments or questions on this item?
Yeah, question on the vehicle signage. Does this mean every vehicle that a contractor owns has to have your name and license number on it?
No, it does not. It's only vehicles that are commercially registered.
I think all contractors' vehicles are commercially registered.
The answer would be yes.
DMV?
I know a lot of contractors have vehicles with names on them, they usually have a license. There's also a lot of contractors that have vehicles that aren't marked at all with their companies. There's probably some outside right now. So curious if it applies to every vehicle.
Registrar Folk, or should we get the legal opinion or get back to that?
No, pretty familiar with that section of law. If the vehicles are commercially registered, many of the smaller contractors that might have vehicles that are not owned by the business itself, they wouldn't be commercially registered. I know we've looked into this in the past, and many times the vehicle's over a certain weight. I don't know, Steve, if you want to look at that, but what we're looking at, though, in practice is if we're going out to a job site and there are generally trucks that are at that site, and if they're commercially registered, it's very important for our enforcement staff to know if that's a licensed contractor. That's the benefit of it. At a job site, we can check the business name, the license number, find out it's clear and active, and go on to the next site. It's also an identifier for our industry partners when they suspect unlicensed activity, they report to our SWIFT unit. That's the rationale behind it, but that's the way we look at the law. If it's commercially registered, belongs to the business, then they have to have the license number and the business name on the vehicle.
It's kind of an interesting point that you bring up, Board Member Guy, because yeah, I have an old 1968 Ford F-100, and because of the weight, it has a commercial license. So even though it's just my primary vehicle, so I don't know if we need to look any more into that, because that's an interesting point you bring up.
It could be something that the chair may want to consider for a ledge committee meeting in the future. I don't think the intent here, though, is to make any significant changes to the existing requirement. Yeah.
And just to add on to that, there's a 2003 statute. We're simply adding teeth to it with the disciplinary response. That there was no way to enforce 7029-6 since 2003 without this added language. So we're here adding the language, and if you want to agendize something about limiting signage on a future meeting, we could do that.
Yeah, I think that's good, because it's a good point you bring up. So maybe something through the chair we look into later.
Yeah, we should add it as a future agenda item, because
I
there's
think,
a lot of vehicles registered to contractors that, there's a lot of vehicles registered to contractors that aren't marked out there.
and this is obviously current professions codes added, they're only adding this one red line failure to comply with the section, right? So it's already a law, but what you're saying, it's kind of the mechanism now.
I would propose to remove discipline before we figure this out.
I don't think we can change the language, but yeah, I have a license on mine, it's Pepe 68, so that's my license plate. All right, any other board member comments or questions on this item? All right, seeing none, any public comment? All right, would any board members like to make a motion to submit the omnibus proposal to the Senate Business Professions and Economic Development Committee for inclusion in the committee's omnibus bill?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All right, thank you. Any discussion on the motion?
Can I make a motion to amend and remove this item we just talked about, the discipline statement? Leave it as is till we have another meeting on it?
Yeah, certainly. We have a second on that amendment?
Second.
All right, second. Can we do it? All right, any discussion?
I think to move this forward, maybe the amendment should be like may cause, add the word may, so it can continue moving this thing forward, and then may cause for disciplinary action. I don't know if legal, if that is a acceptable amendment. Instead of the failure to comply with this section constitutes a cause for disciplinary action, just add the word may, and then that at least gives our enforcement team the teeth that would be needed.
That amendment could certainly be made under this item.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So with no discussion on amendment to the motion, we'll call for the question.
So my ask, so I was the official second, and so the request was to amend my motion. So first, to the motion maker, would that be?
Okay, so it's to amend my motion. Okay, so.
Two amendments.
We'll amend the motion to, what do we?
The amendment would be failure to comply with this section may constitute a cause of disciplinary action.
Okay.
And the other three amendments, non-substantive, would remain the same.
Correct. So what he said. So.
If you're permitting that amendment, is there a
Make the
second?
motion to, yeah, go ahead.
I'll second it, Diana Love.
Thank you. Any discussion on the amendment to the motion? All right, call for the question.
Call for the question.
All right, thank you. And this amendment to the motion would carry the motion. So Robin, would you call the vote?
Michael Mark,
Yes.
Miguel Galarza, Alan Guy,
Aye.
Joel Barton,
Aye.
Rodney Cobos,
Aye.
Amanda Gallo and Jacob Lopez both have excused absences. Diana Love,
Aye.
Henry Nutt,
Aye.
Steve Pinelli.
Aye.
Joseph Preciado.
Aye.
Jim Ruane.
Aye.
Thomas Ruiz and Mary Taggart both have excused absences. Motion passes 10-0.
Thank you, board members. Now moving on to the next item on our agenda, review, discussion, and possible action to authorize staff to initiate non-substantive regulatory changes under the Section 100 rule without seeking advance board approval. And for the final item on today's agenda, if you're tired of listening to me, I would like to turn it over to Legislative Chief, Ms. May.
Yeah, we are.
Thank you, Member Barton, and again, good morning, Chair Mark and board members. Today, I am seeking your approval to allow CSLB staff to initiate the regulatory process for minor or non-substantive regulatory changes without first seeking the board's approval. These non-substantive and minor regulatory changes are referred to as a Section 100 change. The Section 100 process allows an agency like CSLB to add, revise, or delete text from the California Code of Regulations without complying with the general rulemaking process because the proposed change is minor and non-substantive. Some examples of regulatory changes that would qualify for a Section 100 include renumbering or reordering an existing regulatory provision, deleting a regulatory provision when its statutory authority has been repealed, or correcting a grammatical or punctuation error. Section 100 rulemakings move much quicker through the regulatory process because they do not require a public comment period, nor do they require the same level of supporting documentation as a regular rulemaking would. Again, a Section 100 is only applicable for non-substantive changes to regulations. Historically, CSLB staff have sought the board's approval prior to filing a Section 100 change, though this is not required by the law, nor the Office of Administrative Law. Your approval today would allow staff to move quickly to make minor updates to regulations without having to wait for the next quarterly board meeting, would reduce the number of items on meeting agendas, and ultimately conserve board member and staff time to be spent on more pressing work. If you decide today to waive initial approval of Section 100 rulemakings, I will still provide updates at our regularly scheduled board meetings on any Section 100 changes. Rest assured, regular substantive rulemakings are still subject to the board's advance approval, so there'd be no change there. I'll turn it back to Chair Barton, but I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. May. Are there any board member comments or questions on this item? All right, go ahead.
Would there be a highlighted or some kind of notation that something was changed for the public to see that something's been changed?
It would be filed with the Office of Administrative Law,
Okay.
and that's public. Again, and it goes through like a pretty big vetting process just the same. It goes through the Department of Consumer Affairs, the agency above us, and then the governor's office, and they all have to agree that it's non-substantive, and then we would file with OAL.
Okay.
Thank you.
Rebecca, if I could, what you're asking is that you not have to get approval before you start the process, but once you've made the changes that you're recommending, you would bring that to the board before going to Office of Administrative Law, no?
No, just to be able to file with OAL. Because again, they're non-substantive, so I don't know that, I mean, I think it's a time-saving measure so that we can move a bit more quickly. These are, like I said, pretty minor items, like it's renumbering, it's changing a erroneous cross-reference, it's that kind of stuff. So I don't know that that's, I mean, of course, it's to the board's, decision if they want to authorize staff to do that. We could, if you wanted to maybe review again after, like maybe in a year's time and see what staff has done, and then if it was, maybe not what the board had expected, to then ask for review. But again, I was thinking, especially after today's long legislative agenda, you might not want to hear from me on these kind of minor tweaks.
David, just so you know, we do codes and standards all the time where changes happen with numbering or lettering, or we see verbiage that's wrong. So they have the authority to go in and make those changes accordingly. We get a notification based on a printout that comes out towards the middle of the year or the end of the year once it's been done, just for the minimal changes, and it doesn't really affect anything that's stating, oh, you can't do this, oh, we're just gonna take that out because we don't like it. No, it's, oh, you can't do this, and it was number 1, 2, 3, but now it's 1, 2, 3, 4 because something else preceded that, and now it changed. It's just a renumbering or text that was like written wrong. We get notified that it's done, but it doesn't make any changes, but we don't get anything, so I'm also on the board there, we don't get anything from the board saying, do we approve those changes? They're automatically done, and we're just given here's what it was, this is what it is after the fact, and if there's something that was major, then we can always go back to it, but 99% of the times, it's not.
I also would just thank you for the staff looking for ways to make our time more efficient.
Trying.
I do have a quick question, based on what Steve just said. Is that item that can be attached in our booklet, like just to show what was done, just so we can just read it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, we would just continue it in the.
Yeah, once a year or
have it in the
something,
materials.
an
Or-
updated page or
Yes.
something. Okay, thank you.
All right, great, thank you. Any further board member comments or questions? All right, are there any public comment on this item? All right, thank you. Would a board member like to make a motion to allow CSLB staff to promulgate Section 100 rulemakings without advance board approval?
So moved.
Second.
All right, been regularly moved second. Any discussion? All right, do I have a call for the question?
Call for the question.
All right, thank you. Robin, would you take the roll, please?
Michael Mark?
Yes.
Miguel Galarza?
Aye.
Alan Guy?
Aye.
Joel Barton?
Aye.
Rodney Cobos?
Aye.
Amanda Gallo and Jacob Lopez both have excused absences. Diana Love?
Aye.
Henry Nutt?
Aye.
Steve Pinelli?
Aye.
Joseph Pisciotto?
Aye.
Jim Ruane?
Aye.
Thomas Ruiz and Mary Tucker both have excused absences. Motion passes 10-0.
All right, thank you, Robin. And with you all, this concludes the legislative items for today. So thank you, and back to Chair Mark.
Thank you, Legislative Chair Barton. I remember being the chair of that committee, there's a lot of conversations usually. With that, we're going to take a quick break. The time now is 11:01. We'll take a break till 11:11.
testing, testing.
Inc., for the construction of a new home in San Jose for $1,235,000. Over the course of the project, Green Bay received $1,207,000. Construction began in October of 2018, but ceased in January 2022, with the project only partially completed. A complaint was filed with CSLB, and an industry expert was hired to inspect and evaluate items of alleged substandard workmanship. The IE determined that some of the work deviated from the approved plans and specifications, as well as from accepted industry standards. The IE estimated the cost to correct at just under $100,000. Upon completion of the investigation, an accusation was filed which resulted in the revocation of Green Bay's contractor's license, effective July 3rd, 2024. The next highlight I would like to share is on page 117 and is titled, Tubbs Fire Case Ends with Guilty Verdict for Revoked Contractor. In November 2017, Calistoga homeowners who lost their home in the devastating Tubbs fire hired Ruben Roncancio, a revoked licensee, to perform the construction debris removal. Rather than having a set contract price as required by law, the contractual agreement was that Roncancio would submit invoices for work performed. Roncancio performed minimal work while submitting invoices totaling $16,683. Of the invoiced amount, $5,747 was specifically for disposal fees. However, receipts from the landfill showed a total of $990 in charges. The homeowners paid Roncancio a total of $14,000, then refused to pay any more due to disputes over the invoices, which led to Roncancio filing a mechanics lien against the property in the amount of $18,000. A CSLB complaint was received and investigated by our Special Investigations Unit and ultimately referred to the Napa County District Attorney's Office, where they filed felony and misdemeanor charges against Roncancio. In September 2024, the case went to a jury trial. On October 4, 2024, the jury came back with a guilty verdict for contracting without a license, filing a false document with a government agency, and perjury. Roncancio was sentenced in November 2024 to 90 days jail time and 2 years of formal probation. This concludes my highlights. I will turn it back over to you, Chair Kobos.
Thank you, Steve. Continuing on the statistical update, you will note at the top of page 113 some staffing information. Enforcement supervisors and managers continue to prioritize filling vacancies. As of October 31st, 2024, there were only 10 vacant positions within the enforcement division. Interviews have already been conducted and candidates selected for 5 of these vacant positions. On page 119, you will find complaint statistics. For the period of January 1st, 2024 to October 31st, 2024, a total of 18,297 complaints have been initiated. CSLB is on track to receive more than 20,000 consumer complaints this calendar year. As enforcement chair, I plan to convene the enforcement committee meeting early next year to review enforcement prioritization guidelines and opportunities to work with industry to address contractors receiving multiple complaints. With current staffing levels, the optimum maximum enforcement division caseload is 4,860 pending complaints. As of November 7th, 2024, the pending caseload was 5,919. The major contributor to this increased caseload continues to be residential solar installation complaints against a small number of contractors that are receiving an excessive number of complaints. As discussed in prior board meetings, our newly formed multiple offender unit is tasked with investigating contractors with 10 or more open complaints and taking swift and aggressive disciplinary action when violations of contractor's license law are identified. Staff Services Analysts, SSA, and Special Investigators, SI, in the Enforcement Division are working very hard to keep up with the incoming complaints. The weighted monthly case closing average per special investigator in investigative centers remains steady at 8 closures per month, 2 less than the closure goal of 10. SSAs assigned to the 2 CSLB intake mediation centers have done a remarkable job of mediating consumer complaints. From January 1st, 2024 through October 31st, 2024, staff's efforts have resulted in $31.6 million in restitution to financially injured parties. Another board goal is to appropriately disposition all but 100 complaints within the 270 days of receipt. As of October 31st, 2024, 262 complaints exceeded 270 days in age. Enforcement supervisors continue to work closely with their staff and provide guidance during monthly case reviews in an effort to reduce the backlog of aged cases. Beginning at the bottom of page 119, you will find information regarding CSLB-sponsored arbitration and disciplinary action statistics. Let us know if you have any questions about those. And finally, I will provide a brief update on proactive enforcement, which is conducted by 27 special investigators assigned to the Statewide Investigative Fraud Team, or SWIFT. This information begins on page 121 of your packet. From January 1st, 2024 to October 31st, 2024, SWIFT conducted 38 undercover sting operations across the state, participated in 362 sweep days, and responded to 777 leads, or tips received from industry and the public. Investigators closed 2,750 cases as a result of the operations, with 831 cases resulting in administrative or criminal legal action. Additionally, over 981 advisory notices were issued for relatively minor violations. Beginning on page 123, you'll see that the Enforcement Division's Experience Verification Unit has conducted 701 application investigations during the period of October 1st, 2022 to October 31st, 2024. Of the total 444, of that total, 144 were verified or approved, 126 were withdrawn, and 182 were denied, and 8 denials were appealed. At the bottom of page 124, there is an overview of current investigations regarding fraud in the accessory dwelling unit market. As reported in prior board meetings, CSLB has recently received a significant number of consumer-filed complaints regarding contractors failing to complete accessory dwelling units ADU construction projects and causing considerable financial harm. As you recall, consumers who faced issues with ADU projects had an opportunity to share their concerns and ideas with the Legislative Committee during its meeting on September 18, 2024. The committee discussed ideas on enhancing consumer protection related to ADUs, including ensuring that ADU contracts comply with home improvement payment restrictions. 3 of the most egregious violators currently being investigated by CSLB are Anchored Tiny Homes, Next Generation Builders, and Multitasker. I'm happy to report that Anchored Tiny Homes license was revoked on November 8, 2024, and investigators are working closely with the local district attorneys in triaging all remaining complaints for potential criminal violations. Next Generation Builders and Multitasker Constructions are both operating in Southern California and generating dozens of complaints. In one case, an Oceanside family paid over $193,000 to Multitasker for an ADU project intended for a family member with Alzheimer's disease, but the project was never started nearly 2 years later. Such delays have caused severe financial and emotional distress for affected homeowners. And lastly, at the bottom of page 125, you will find the enforcement training update, which includes the most recent Enforcement Academy, which has held at CSLB headquarters during the week of September 16th, 2024. Other significant recent training events was the annual NASCLA, National Association of State Contractors Licensing Agencies conference from September 9th through the 12th. The packet incorrectly listed the dates as November 9th through the 12th. CSLB was able to send 18 enforcement staff who received training on various topics, including investigative techniques and caseload management. That concludes the enforcement program statistical update. This is an informational item only. No action is required of the board. Do any board members have any comments?
Yeah, I have a comment. I just want to make sure we recognize Delphine Tran again. If you saw like the total amount of experience, total complaints or total amount verified was 700, and she was like 400 of those. So again, she's doing great work. And why it's so important is, as someone applies for a license, we want to make sure that they have the proper level of journey person experience in that classification before they actually are approved. So that's for the consumer protection. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
I have a question. Is there a pocket of monies somewhere for consumers to be made whole when the businesses go out of business? Because if they're out of business and unlicensed, they don't have there's no way to recoup the money to the consumer. Does the district attorney have a pocket of money? Does it come out of general fund? Does CSLB do anything? Everybody's saying no? No? Consumers just out.
For the licensed contractors, they have the $25,000 bond, but that would be it.
Any other comments from the board? Are there any comments from the public here in the room? No comments? Thank you. Robin? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, okay. F2, okay. The next agenda item is the review, thanks. Review, discussion, and possible action on supporting information included with solar energy system disclosure document pursuant to subdivision C of the Business and Professions Code, section 7169. At this time, I will turn it over to Registrar David Vogt to cover this section. Dave.
Thank you, Cobos. This relates to a long-standing collaboration between the CSLB and the Public Utilities Commission. It is a disclosure document for consumers purchasing residential solar and storage systems. Before I go into a little bit further, I just wanted to share that there's an interesting dynamic at play here, and that the PUC staff cannot work directly with the California Solar and Storage Association or other industry stakeholders, unless it's in a publicly agendized meeting. At CSLB, we do not have that same restriction. So we've been the intermediary between the two parties. And I want to give a little shout out to Mike Jimnetsky on our executive staff, who did take the lead role in working, putting this proposal that's before you together. Now, the document in the packet is a supplemental to a one-page solar disclosure document that has been in effect since 2019. The law that required that one-page document also provided for an optional consumer disclosure document, and again, that's what we're going to be discussing. The purpose of the optional document is for consumers to understand the potential energy savings they will achieve in the first year of their new system. It also provides other information that may be useful to consumers when purchasing a solar system. If you take a look at it, that information will relate to really identifying the contractor and the payment terms. How is it being financed? Is it a power purchase agreement, a lease agreement? Now, while I mentioned the document is discretionary, the Public Utility Commission does intend to develop this document and require that it be used by contractors within the investor-owned utility districts. Our new board member, Joseph, represents SMUD in Sacramento, which would not be an investor-owned utility. So that's a public utility. The investor-owned utilities are San Diego Gas and Electric, PG&E, Southern California Edison. They are intending to have a full commission meeting in January, and so The statute requires that CSLB and PUC work together to develop this document. While we do think we're very close to having an agreement on the document, I would say that in the last few days, I've been involved in 2 meetings with Public Utility Commission staff, and I had the opportunity to meet with the California Solar and Storage Association yesterday. And in doing that, I've asked that Josh Buswell Charco, who's with us today, attend this meeting and discuss any concerns that he may have or support of this. From a staff perspective, I have a motion that I could read now or later. I'm not sure what's most appropriate. But in general, what we're asking you to consider is approving this document in concept and give staff the ability to make non-substantial edits prior to the PUC Commission meeting. And what that would mean is we'd continue to work with Josh, we'd continue to work with PUC staff to finalize it and then put it before the commissioners. The motion would also include that once the PUC commissioners approve this document, that we would post it on the CSLB website. John, should I read the motion now, or what would be most appropriate?
I think you might invite
Josh to speak.
board and public comment before we develop the motion.
Board first. Board comment first.
On. Hello. Yeah, hi, Josh Buswell Charco, Deputy Director at CALSA. Appreciate the opportunity to engage with you all on this. I've been working with Mike on this supplemental disclosure document. This first came around back, I think, in 2019. Then we've been consulting with the commission as well. You know, as the registrar said, it's very close to done. There were just a few areas of feedback that I've been working to solicit from my members. We want to obviously make sure contractors are providing accurate information and then also not providing information that they're unable to provide because they're just not privy to that kind of information. So the kinds of changes that it looks like we're going to recommend are very cosmetic, just a few tweaks here and there, but nonetheless important changes, we think. So look forward to continuing to work with Mike. I'll have feedback to him shortly.
No board comment. Maybe hear the recommended staff motion.
Okay, the recommended staff motion is to approve in concept the solar energy system supplemental information document that's included in pages 130 through 134, 135 of the board packet. This information is about energy savings for consumers going solar and other consumer protection information about purchasing solar energy systems. To authorize staff to provide non-substantive edits to the document after further consultation with industry and the PUC before it is submitted to the Commission in January 2025. Any edits made will have to be consistent with Business and Professions Code Section 7169, and to authorize staff to finalize the document and post it on the website for public use following Public Utility Commission approval.
I'll make a motion to go with staff recommendation as read.
Second.
Call for board comment and public comment on the motion as stated.
Enforcement Chair Kobos.
Seek a motion to approve?
There was a motion in a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Call for the question.
Make a motion to call for the question.
Okay. Michael Mark,
Yes.
Miguel Galarza,
Aye.
Alan Guy,
Aye.
Joel Barton,
Aye.
Rodney Cobos,
Aye.
Amanda Gallo and Jacob Lopez both have excused absences. Diana Love. Henry Nutt.
Aye.
Steve Pinelli. Joseph Preciado.
Aye.
Jim Ruane.
Aye.
Thomas Ruiz and Mary Tyker both have excused absences. Motion passes 10-0.
Does that conclude your enforcement,
That
Chair?
concludes enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Enforcement Chair Cobos. We will move on to Licensing Chair, Jim Ruane.
Thank you, Chair Mark. Good morning. I am Jim Ruane, the 2024-2025 Licensing Committee Chair, providing the Licensing and Testing Division update today with assistance from Licensing Chief Carol Gagnon. The Licensing and Testing Statistical Update Agenda Item G1 begins on page 137. Regarding applications, the table on page 141 indicates the number of applications received for new licenses, additional classifications, replacing qualifiers, and home improvement salespersons. As you can see, CSLB received over 12,000 applications in the last quarter. The number was slightly decreased from the previous quarter, but this typically occurs as California moves into the fall season. On page 142, you can see that all of our processing times are staying close to or under 3 weeks. Staff has kept licensing processing times at or below 3 weeks for over a year now and are doing an excellent job at keeping up with incoming applications and renewals. A few units have even managed to keep their response times under 2 weeks for the entire year. Recognition is given to the bonds, ad class, qualifier replacement, home improvement salesperson registration, and certified license history teams. The table on page 143 lists a disposition of applications by fiscal year. The number of voided applications per year has gone down from 2022-2023, meaning more applications are continuing through the licensure process instead of voiding out. As seen on page 144, CSLB received 29,000 renewal applications in the last quarter. This is slightly down from the previous quarter, but again, this is typical for the fall season. Page 149 indicates the work of CSLB's Judgments Unit. In October 2024, 64 licenses were notified of outstanding liabilities, 78 licenses were notified of final judgments, and 166 licenses were notified of payment of claims from bond companies. Once staff received completed paperwork from the courts, bond companies, FTB, or other agencies, they send a letter to the license holder informing them that they need to comply, or their license will be suspended. The suspend line on the table is the number of licenses suspended that month, and the reinstate line is the number of licenses that paid their liability, judgment, or claim and had their license moved back to clear active status. I will now ask Licensing Chief Carol Gagnon to give the testing update, which starts on page 151. Carol?
Thank you, Jim. The table on page 151 indicates that between November 2023 and October 2024, PSI exams administered a little more than 54,000 exams for CSLB candidates. In October 2024, CSLB hit record numbers with over 4,900 of CSLB's exams being scheduled at a PSI test center. Currently, there are no backlogs in testing. As mentioned on page 152, candidates can take their exams in 20 test centers in California and an additional test center in Oregon. The most popular test center is still Sacramento, which has administered over 6,300 exams for CSLB in the last 12 months. Other popular test centers are Agora Hills near Malibu, El Monte, Riverside, and San Diego. When candidates register to take their exams, they can pick the test center location, date, and time that they prefer. As indicated on page 153, the Examination Development Unit released one new exam between August and the end of October 2024, which was the C11 elevator exam. A new exam is one that has been completely revised from the ground up with a new occupational analysis, item writing, updated references, and a new pass point. This happens for every exam every 5 years on average. Note that there are additional 5 examinations that are over at PSI being programmed for their release. That would be the A, General Engineering, the B, General Building, the C23, ornamental metal, C28, lock and security, and the C50 reinforcing steel. So those will be coming out in the next few months and probably mentioned in the next board packet. The table on page 154 indicates that in the last year between August 2023 and July 2024, over 9,000 Spanish translated exams have been taken by CSLB candidates. CSLB staff and bilingual subject matter experts have reviewed the wording in 6 of those Spanish language exams to ensure that the Spanish used is Latin American Spanish, which is more common in California than European Spanish. Future bank translations will specifically request that Latin American Spanish be used. Staff are still assessing the impact of these changes as the new versions of the exams are being sent to the test centers. I will now ask Licensing Committee Chair Jim Ruing to report on the grant administration for the Construction Management Education Grant account. Agenda item G2, which begins on page 157.
Thank you, Carol. Item number 2, CMEA grants for 2025. Please turn to page 157 for agenda item G2. At the end of each year, staff requests the board review and potentially approve grant awards for the Construction Management Education account. As seen on page 160 this year, the board requested and received approval from the Department of Consumer Affairs to increase disbursement authority to $225,000 in fiscal year 2025-26. This will provide for additional funding for institutions that offer construction management education. This is done each year based on the amount of funds in the account. This year, 6 colleges submitted grant applications. The $225,000 is distributed among 6 public colleges selected by the Construction Management Education Advisory Committee. The members of the committee are listed on page 159. Revenues in the account are from voluntary contributions made by licensees at the time of the license renewal fee payment and are sufficient to support this request. I'd like to call on board members for any comments. Any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, I would like to ask the board to consider the following motion. Direct staff to distribute the 2025 CMEA grant awards to the identified colleges according to the staff recommendation on page 160. Based on approval from the Department of Finance to expend $225,000 from the CMEA account. Please state your last name and for motion and second.
Guy first, Finelli second.
Okay, thank you. Any final board comment or public comment? Okay, Robin?
The register folk will call the roll.
Okay, thank you.
Henry? Excuse me. Michael Mark,
Yes.
Miguel Galarza,
Aye.
Alan Guy,
Aye.
Joel Barton,
Aye.
Rodney Cobos,
Aye.
Miguel Galarza.
Aye again.
Okay, we'll do it a third time to be sure.
Can't vote twice.
Diana Love,
Aye.
Henry Nutt,
Aye.
Steve Pinelli,
Aye.
Joseph Preciado,
Aye.
Jim Rowan.
Aye.
Motion carries, unanimous.
All right, thank you. Our item number 3 is proposal to create a new classification for wildfire debris removal and flood muckout. Carol will now address the staff proposal to create a new debris removal classification. This is agenda item G3, starting on page 161. Carol?
Thank you. First, I wanted to explain that the headings in the board packet are not correct. We have decided to take a different approach related to consumer protection. So what we are proposing is a C class, a specialty class, not a D limited specialty. I just want to clarify that. So, and the C class information is in your packet. That was correct. It was just the heading that was wrong. So on page 163, I direct your attention there, agenda item G3. Californians have faced an increasing number of natural disasters over the past 20 years, with wildfires and floods having the biggest impact on homeowners. In 2024 alone, over 7,000 wildfires burned more than 1 million acres in California, surpassing the totals from previous years. These fires destroyed 2,077 structures and resulted in 1 fatality. Homeowners cleaning up after a natural disaster have a choice of certain license classifications they can hire to do the work, as it stands now. A B, general building contractor, if they also have a contract to build the new home. An A general engineering or C21 building moving demolition contractor can remove debris and perform the minor and significant demolition necessary to remove parts of or the entire structure. And a C61 D64 limited specialty, non-specialized classification can just do minor debris removal and minor alterations to structures in a post-disaster area. However, none of these trades are specifically designed to work in disaster cleanup. Cleaning out debris after a disaster is dangerous work. According to the California Department of Industrial Relations website, the dangers include exposure to toxic gases, still smoldering debris if it's after a fire, collapsing structures, live electrical wires, leaking gas pipes, and toxic ash from the burned plastics, paints, and other materials that were used to build the home. With floods, additional dangers can include mold and sewage. In Butte County, the site of the recent park fire, as well as the site of the Camp Fire in 2018 that destroyed the city of Paradise, they reached out to CSLB to ask which trades could be used to clean out home sites after the park fire. This prompted staff discussions about how to help Butte County now and what can be done in the future to ensure that contractors doing debris removal will have knowledge of all the safety protocols needed for the work. For now, staff is working with Butte County to give them a list of the contractors in their area who can do the work under their current license. In addition, staff will continue to work with Butte County and the Governor's Office of Emergency Services to ensure sufficient contractors are available to meet the existing need and address any potential licensing hurdles. Staff also proposes the creation of a new C specialty classification that will cover the specific safety and logistical factors related to clearing home sites after a wildfire or flood, such as the PPE needed, the specialized training, debris disposal methods, etc. So I will now turn it back to Jim to ask for comment.
Thank you, Carol. Any comment or questions from board members?
I have a question. Is there not a way to make sure that the C61 actually just ends up being able to do all the cleanup as well and make it as part of the C61 requirement instead of just giving them minimal and make it where they have to actually know all this for removal of, you know, debris with fire and toxics and gas and sewer, because sometimes they're going into places they don't even know that that's there until they start removing the debris. So why not just make that whole license a part of this new license and make them actually have to be trained for that?
Part of the difficulty that we encountered is that the people that would have the experience doing this clean out and would have the training are those that were already listed in here, the A's, the B's, the C21s, and maybe a D64 if they happen to have enough experience doing it. So part of our concern was, where are we going to find someone with 4 years of experience in this to be able to qualify for a new D license? So that was part of our issue with just creating a D and putting it out there and doing it.
Yes, Miguel?
Yeah, was there not a movement or some thought process in expanding the hazardous classification to go beyond underground tank removal? As a lot of these constituents that we're speaking of are in Superfund sites, and typically, in my example, you know, we can't work on a Superfund site unless we have a hazardous certification, which deals with toxicity, RCA, right? Ignitability, reactivity, and corrosivity. So was there a change in the direction we were going with that, or I'd love to hear that.
Well, a number of years ago, we had looked into expanding the HAZ classification, and coronavirus happened, and we got really busy, and it sort of got tabled. So that information and that research is still there, and that's something we would consider with this. We just haven't, you know, it's only come up in the past few weeks. So we're still considering all of our options, which we will, of course, bring before the board as we get farther along in this. That's why I can't, like, propose a trade description for you, because we're still working out all the details of what we want to do. But yeah, I think that would be a good possibility.
Good. Alan?
2 questions. Will contractors still be able to complete this work under their A, B, or C21 license?
Correct. Yes, they would.
Thank you. And then the state of California has a very well-run program for this. My firm has done a lot of it over the years. State of California does require a HAZWOPER certification to do this work, which, kind of pile on Miguel said, I think it's very good, because there is a lot of toxic substances that are cleaned up. And when we've been in these disaster zones, we've seen people with or without the license and without a HAZWOP are doing it for the homeowners, and it is putting the environment and the workers at risk because they're not following protocols. So my recommendation would be, even if we do this classification, I think you should still require a HAZWOP or certification to do this work to protect the environment and the workers.
Thank you. I'm going to make a note of that.
Good. Any other comments or questions from board members? Any comments or questions for the public on this item?
Licensing Chair, Ruin, I have a question. So
Yes.
what would be the expected timelines for something like this? For go through rulemaking process, and obviously there's like immediate need, it sounds like. So how this is future, but for the immediate need.
So for the immediate need, we will continue to work with Butte County to get them the names of and addresses of contractors in their area that could do the work under the A, the B, and the C21 and the D64 limited specialty. As for the exam process, it's probably going to take 18 months to 2 years. For the regulation process, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca because she'll know how long that takes. And these can be partly done simultaneously as long as we know what you have approved for the board trade description. Exams can get started.
About 18 months to 2 years for regs.
And if I could just make one comment, one thing we may want to consider is having a licensing committee meeting in January or February, because there's a lot of interest in this.
Yeah.
Cal OES and Butte County officials want to be part of the discussion, so I hope that that can happen.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else from the board? Anything from the public? All right. I'd like to ask the board to consider the following motion: direct staff to begin work on the regulations necessary to add a new C specialty classification for disaster debris removal.
So moved. Cobos.
Second.
There's a motion and a second.
I just, on the question, in the meeting packet, it's the request of a licensing committee to take the lead on pursuing. So that's what Register Vote stated. Sometime January, February, the licensing committee. So the board is taking action today just to move this forward to the license committee to have further discussion. That's what the board is taking. That there's a potential for a new classification, but the licensing committee need to really work out the kinks.
Right, for clarification.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Any other public comment? Robin, will you take the roll, please?
Just to clarify, it was the classification C for debris removal?
Yes.
Okay,
To investigate and look into the possibility.
okay.
Guess he heard you.
Michael Mark,
Yes.
Miguel Galarza,
Aye.
Alan Guy,
Aye.
Joel Barton,
Aye.
Rodney Cobos,
Aye.
Amanda Gallo and Jacob Lopez both have excused absences. Diana Love,
Aye.
Henry Nutt,
Aye.
Steve Pinelli, Joseph Preciado,
Aye.
Jim Ruane.
Aye.
Motion passes 10-0.
Thank you, and this concludes the licensing and testing update.
Thank you, License Committee Chair Jim Ruane. I appreciate the information. So moving on, we're moving on to agenda item H, Public Affairs. This is the last item to today's agenda for public. We will have a closed session afterward. With that, I turn it over to Public Affairs Committee Chair Diana Love for the Public Affairs update.
Thank you, Chair. I will now share the public affairs update starting on page 169. The Public Affairs Office, or PAO, is responsible for media, industry, licensing, and consumer communications, as well as outreach. They provide proactive public relations, respond to media inquiries, and develop and distribute publications and newsletters. PAO creates content for CSLB social media channels and website, including webcasts and videos. Regarding the website, Public Affairs has updated the alerts box on the homepage to remind consumers and contractors about home improvement contract rules, especially regarding progress payments. Our website also includes the Disaster Help Center, which resources for consumers. From August through October, CSLB participated in 9 local assistance centers as requested by the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. in all responses to wildfires around the state. In the area of video and digital services, PAO continues to focus on creating informative videos for consumers, licensees, and applicants. Recent videos have included tips for hiring a licensed contractor for various home improvement projects, including a tips for hiring an HVAC contractor that will be shared later. The videos are shared on YouTube and other social media platforms and archived on the CSLB website. PAO has also prioritized translating and producing Spanish language consumer and industry videos. You can see a list of 5 of live and recorded videos starting on page 171. On the same page, you'll see how PAO continues to increase CSLB's following on social media by improving engagement with applicants, licensees, the news media, and other stakeholders. CSLB maintains an active presence on Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, and LinkedIn, where all platforms continue to show growth. The most popular post on Facebook was posted in August, which reminded both contractors and consumers about when workers' compensation insurance is required. Posts about sting operations also continue to be popular on social media. On page 174, PAO shows an updated subscriber list of nearly 192,000, which includes the licensee information listserv. The subscriber list also receives CSLB's industry bulletins and press releases. Between August 1st and October 31st, CSLB issued industry bulletins related to more detail about workers' compensation code requirements law that took effect in July, along with bulletin in October warning contractors to not click on suspicious emails requesting a digital signature. PAO responded to 35 media inquiries between August and the end of October. The media coverage focused on various topics, with the majority focused on issues consumers are having with accessory dwelling units or solar projects. Public Affairs also issued a consumer alert in late October to warn consumers to not pay too much money up front on home improvement projects, including both ADUs and solar. On page 176 shows the outreach events CSLB attended between August and October. Our outreach coordinator has been busy providing key consumer protection information to seniors and other stakeholders. She plans to reach out to new legislators in January in our efforts to reach more consumers through these events. You'll also see on this page a list of the publications and reports CSLB completed between August and October. They included the final 2025 through 2027 strategic plan that was provided at September's meeting, the fall newsletter, and what you should know before hiring a licensed contractor. The Public Affairs Office also writes and publishes content for internal communications. On page 177, you will see a list of the intranet articles PAO has between August and October, highlighting upcoming meetings, DAC's Cornhole Tournament, and the celebration of the accomplishments of Northern California Enforcement Academy graduates. The intranet is accessible to all CSLB employees around the state. Also on page 177, you will see that CSLB's Public Information Center continues to see low wait times for callers. The wait times have been under the board goal of 6 minutes for all of 2024. Since this is an information item, no action is required of the board. Are there any board comments? Are there any comments from the public? That concludes the Public Affairs Program update. And now it looks like I am doing H2. which begins on page 181. Last week, I was part of the Handy Person Advisory Committee meeting with member Joel Barton, where we discussed the implementation of AB 2622, which will increase the existing licensure exemption from $500 to $1,000, as long as the work does not involve a permit or involve employing anyone. We reviewed the press release and industry bulletin and provided some additional edits to Public Affairs Management to make the new rules clear for both consumers and industry. Consumer education will be a big part of the implementation. In addition to the press release and industry bulletin, Public Affairs included basic information in its fall newsletter and will include more details in the winter newsletter, all of which will be shared on social media. Public Affairs is also updating 10 publications where the $500 amount is mentioned, along with revising outreach presentations for both Senior Scam Stopper and Consumer Scam Stopper seminars. We also learned about enforcement's effort to implement AB 2622 consumer protection measures, such as training staff about the new exemption amount and tracking complaints for construction work under $1,000 to determine if consumers are facing harm. IT is updating the codes in CSLB system to make for easy tracking. The legislation will hopefully lead to an increase in B2 residential remodeling applications, as the ability to perform unlicensed work for higher value may provide experience necessary to qualify for B2 classifications. This item is educational only, but I would be interested in any additional items from board members to continue to ensure consumer protection with the new law. Do any board members have any comments?
I would just make a comment. We just want to make sure it's clear to the consumers of California that if a permit is required, then that law the exemption is not $1,000 level, or if they have another person working for them. So just please, on our social media posts and all posts going forward, and maybe on a banner on our webpage, is yes, the limit was raised to $1,000, but not if you employ someone else and if you require a building permit. So we just got to make sure that's clear.
Thank you. Are any comments from the public or any other board? Excuse me.
One quick question. Was there a provision in here that, to your point, getting the experience under B for B2, is there a provision that shows that you're actually paying taxes on the money that you're earning versus cash wages or receiving cash payment?
I think I'll refer to Registrar Report.
Well, there's different ways of qualifying your experience. And so, yes, many of our applicants will voluntarily show tax records or pay records, where others will provide a list of jobs that they've performed. So, we try to be somewhat creative to work with the applicant to qualify their experience if they in fact have it. I hope that would answer your question. But if they can demonstrate they've been performing work up to $1,000 for a period of 4 years independently at the journey level of above, we think that would qualify them for our B2 classification, which would be pretty exciting because we looked at that classification as the entry into the full B license at some point.
And I was just referring to our legal team, and he was telling me that they do have to do a 1099 if you perform work over $600. So that would be reported to IRS. Any other board member comments? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, I will continue on the next item, which is H3. The next item can be found on page 185. It's an update regarding a bill that took effect this year and updated statute to allow CSLB to collect applicant or licensee email addresses. The law requires that an applicant or licensee provide the email address when they apply or when they renew, and that the email addresses are not public record. Recently, there has been discussion over the appropriate use of CSLB contacting applicants and licensees using the email addresses provided. CSLB currently uses the email addresses for the following: distributing the California Licensed Contractors newsletter and industry bulletins to ensure licensees are informed about updates and changes in the industry. Also recruiting subject matter experts for exam development to ensure CSLB's licensees exam remain current with industry trends. While there have been requests from both industry and other state agencies, CSLB cannot provide these email addresses to them per statute. This item is informational only. Are there any comments from the board? Are there any comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll turn the table now to Chief of Public Affairs, Catherine White, for the next agenda item.
Thank you, Diana. We're going to share 2 videos that were created this fall by television specialist Amy Lawrence. The first was for Construction Inclusion Week, which was October 14th through the 18th. The week builds awareness and celebrates inclusion and belonging while providing educational and business resources for the construction industry. This was shared on social media that week and also posted on our YouTube channel. David, can you please play the video?
Embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the construction industry strengthens the workplace and fosters innovation. CSLB proudly supports Construction Inclusion Week and provides training and resources for applicants and licensees to thrive. Learn more at cslb.ca.gov.
Thank you, David, for sharing that. And thank you, Amy, for creating it. The second video is tips for hiring an HVAC contractor. As we continue to create more tips videos for consumers, an HVAC contractor video was pertinent as consumers may need to fix their heaters this winter or venture their ACs in the spring and summer. And David, if you can please play the second video.
If your air conditioning stops working or you need a new heater, you will need to hire an HVAC contractor. HVAC stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. HVAC contractors install, repair, and maintain the heating and cooling systems that regulate your home's temperature and keep you comfortable. Before hiring an HVAC contractor, here's some information to help you avoid problems and to make sure your project runs smoothly. Start by doing your research and hiring a licensed contractor. HVAC systems vary from home to home. For example, you may have a split system with separate heating and cooling components. Make sure the contractor you hire is experienced with your system and that they're licensed by CSLB. You should look for someone with a C20 warm air heating, ventilating, and air conditioning classification. All C20 contractors are required to carry workers' compensation insurance regardless of whether they have employees. Licensed contractors have met requirements that include passing trade and law exams, having work experience in the trade, and undergoing a background check. Avoid unlicensed contractors who don't have these protections and often ask for too much money up front and may not complete the job correctly. You can ask friends or neighbors for licensed contractor referrals or use CSLB's Find My Licensed Contractor tool to search licensed HVAC contractors in your area. Get at least 3 bids and check references. You should obtain detailed bids that include information on costs, contractor availability, energy efficiency, and warranties. Don't just go with the lowest bid, and do your research into who is the best contractor for your project. Ask contractors for their license number and check their references and reviews. You can use CSLB's Check the License tool to search a contractor's license number to see if there have been any complaints against their license. Get a written contract. Make sure all the details and expectations of your project are written into the contract. Be as specific as possible. The contract should include all the work that will take place, a payment schedule, and what materials will be used, including specific brands and model numbers. It should also include a detailed timeline of when the work will take place and any warranty information. Ask your contractor if a permit will be required and who will pay for it. Also, you should ask your contractor to pressure test your ductwork, as you may have leakage in your attic that, if not corrected, will result in higher energy bills. Don't sign the contract unless you completely understand the terms, and don't feel pressured into making an immediate decision. You want someone you can trust to get the job done right. Don't pay more than 10% down or $1,000, whichever is less. And it's very important you don't make progress payments that exceed the value of the work performed. For example, don't pay for HVAC equipment that has not been delivered and installed. Stay organized. Keep a file of all paperwork pertaining to your project, including all contract documents, warranties, and payment information. You may need to reference them later. Don't make the final payment until you're satisfied with the completed work. You can find more information and resources on hiring an HVAC contractor at cslb.ca.gov.
Thank you, David, for playing that, and thank you again, Amy, for your work on those videos. As noted earlier, Public Affairs will be working on an educational video to provide consumers the key details before signing a contract on an ADU, including the real cost of building an ADU, so consumers are not paying too much up front. We look forward to working with Steve Pinelli on this. And with that, I'll turn back to Public Affairs Committee Chair Love for any board or public comment.
Thank you, Catherine. This item is an update only. Are there any board comments?
I have a comment on the great work on the videos and the Construction Inclusion Week. I don't know if we had any opportunity to connect with any of the GCs. There's like 5 or 6 primary general contractors that sponsor that event, and there are events that are happening across the Bay Area, and it'd be great if we had some caption of those events to kind of support the effort. And I can help with that.
Thank you, Henry.
Any other board?
I will make a comment just on the C20 HVAC contractor video. I appreciate the emphasis on permits and making sure that it's so much needed for the industry. Right now, there's like, it's, as board member Pinelli understands, it's kind of a wild, wild west on permits in that space. So appreciate that portion.
Any other board comments? I just have one comment. I think the video was very well put together, and I thank staff and all the people who contributed in putting together that video. The one thing that I did see that I thought was, I don't want to call it a fun fact, but we'll call it a fun fact since it's the holiday, is I hope no consumer has a file as large as I saw on that on that video for a project. That was a big file, okay? Okay. So are there any comments from the public? Okay. With that, thank you for your attention to the public affairs items, and I will turn it back to the chair, Mark.
Thank you. So with that, thank you, Diana Love. We'll now move into closed session. Only board members can remain in the room. And with that, during closed session, that will be our last item on the agenda. The agenda item is not available for viewing by the public. After closed session, we'll briefly reconvene in open session and adjournment. The adjournment will not be live streamed. So we'll take a quick 5-minute break so the room can clear, and then we'll start closed session.
Hang around for the tour.
Seeing the education required for apprentices in the sheet metal industry.